Chapter 2602, 2602 Out of Seclusion. 2602 Out of Seclusion. 8 days after the 9 firmament meet, the sun rose and daybreak arrived. Avicii was still dark and sinister. In the darkness, a figure could vaguely be seen sitting in a lotus position motionlessly, as though he had fused with the hell. Suddenly, the figure released purple lights that purged away the surrounding darkness, revealing a face with a silver mask. It was the Martial Dao Prime Body. A purple halo surrounded the body of the Martial Dao Prime Body and runes circulated on it in a mysterious and powerful manner. A moment later, the purple halo suddenly expanded and enveloped the gigantic secret chamber. Before long, the purple halo retracted rapidly and entered the body of the Martial Dao Prime Body. The Martial Dao Prime Body stood up with 2 purple flames burning in his eyes. His aura had already reached its peak. A perfected true Martial Dao Body. When he was at greater mastery of the true martial realm, the Martial Dao Prime Body could suppress ordinary minor Grotto Heaven Immortal Kings barehanded in melee combat. However, if an Immortal King expert released his minor Grotto Heaven, it would be difficult for the Martial Dao Prime Body to suppress him. Back in the Fiend Cave, the reason why the Martial Dao Prime Body could kill a few Fiend Kings was because that was the tomb of Fiend Emperor Apocalypse and no Grotto Heavens could be released. But now that the true Martial Dao Body was perfected, the Martial Dao Prime Body speculated that he could probably crush minor Grotto Heavens with his physique and blood chi alone. In reality, the Martial Dao Prime Body had yet to advance to the next realm of the Martial Dao that corresponded to the Grotto Heaven realm. However, in terms of strength, the perfected true Martial Dao Body of the Martial Dao Prime Body could already suppress minor Grotto Heaven Immortal Kings. Of course, if he was up against Supreme Immortal Kings with major Grotto Heavens, it would still be difficult for the Martial Dao Prime Body to defend once the Grotto Heavens were released. The difference between a minor Grotto Heaven and a major Grotto Heaven seemed like a single word. However, the difference in strength was immense. The Martial Dao Prime Body left Avicii and arrived above Tai Wei Mountain, punching the void casually. Creak! The void trembled and cracks appeared. Given the current strength of the Martial Dao Prime Body, he could tear through the void at any moment and teleport a long distance even without the help of the Hell Suppression Tripod. Initially, this was a power that only Grotto Heaven realm experts could control. The Martial Dao Prime Body tore through the void and entered the spatial tunnel, teleporting back to Tianhuang's sect. As though he sensed something, Heavenly Wolf's ears twitched and he opened his eyes warily. He saw the Martial Dao Prime Body descending above Tianhuang's sect. Everyone, please head to the Tianhuang Hall. I've got something to discuss. The voice of the Martial Dao Prime Body entered the ears of Thunder Monarch Heavenly Wrath and the others with extreme precision. The 7 Emotions Fiend Generals exited seclusion at the same time. Tianhuang Hall. What? When he heard the decision of the Martial Dao Prime Body, Heavenly Wolf was suddenly shocked and shrieked, "You're going to the 9 firmament meet?" Thunder Monarch Heavenly Wrath and the others frowned with grim expressions as well. It won't just be the immortals of the 9 firmament immortal domain at the 9 firmament meet. The monks of the Pure Land of Bliss will be present as well. The Thunder Monarch said in a deep voice, "I heard that the 2 domains even sent more than 20 Supreme Immortal Kings and more than 100 ordinary Immortal Kings for this 9 firmament meet. They have a large force and they're not taking things lightly." The Thunder Monarch had a blood feud with the Great Gene Immortal Kingdom. His son, daughter-in-law and even his best friend, perfected Immortal Burial Knight, were killed by the Great Gene Immortal Kingdom. However, the Thunder Monarch had not made any moves all these years. That was because the Thunder Monarch knew that given the current strength of Tianhuang's sect, they could not fight against the Great Gene Immortal Kingdom. Right now, he only had a minor Grotto Heaven and could not fight against King Gene who had a major Grotto Heaven. Furthermore, the Great Gene Immortal Kingdom was located in the Divine Firmament Immortal Domain. If any faction of the Fiend Domain attacked the Great Gene Immortal Kingdom, Divine Firmament Palace would not sit by idly. Even the other sects and factions of the Divine Firmament Immortal Domain would most likely stand out. The Thunder Monarch knew that Tianhuang's sect was only at its nascent stage. In terms of foundation and strength, they were far inferior to heaven-grade factions such as the Great Gene Immortal Kingdom, let alone the Divine Firmament Immortal Domain. And now, by heading to the Nine Firmament Meet, the Martial Tao Prime Body was not only going against the Divine Firmament Immortal Domain, but the entire Nine Firmament Immortal Domain and even the Pure Land of Bliss. This was no different from striking a stone with an egg. It's fine. The Martial Tao Prime Body said, I had another breakthrough in my seclusion this time round. Everyone was invigorated and delighted. The Thunder Monarch scanned the Martial Tao Prime Body with his spirit consciousness and revealed a puzzled expression. He could not tell the cultivation realm of the Martial Tao Prime Body. However, he could vaguely sense that the latter had yet to control the power of a grotto heaven. In other words, the Martial Tao Prime Body had yet to reach the grotto heaven realm. Can you defeat an immortal king? The Thunder Monarch attempted to ask. The Martial Tao Prime Body said frankly, ordinary immortal kings are not a problem for me, but I can't win against supreme immortal kings. Wah! The Thunder Monarch hesitated. At the Nine Firmament Meet, there were more than 20 supreme immortal kings alone. However, when he saw the resolute gaze of the Martial Tao Prime Body, as though he had made up his mind, he did not persuade further and said in a deep voice, I'll go down and make arrangements to gather the army and prepare to head over together. There's no need. The Martial Tao Prime Body shook his head gently. I'll just bring 2 people with me to the Nine Firmament Meet this time round. Xiao Siluo and Gu Tongyu. Xiao Siluo's heart skipped a beat as she suddenly recalled something. Back when the Martial Tao Prime Body heard that Zither Immortal Meng Yao sent people to hunt them down in the Fiend Domain, he expressed his intention of standing up for them. It said that the 4 great fairies were all at the Nine Firmament Meet. Now that the Martial Tao Prime Body wanted to bring them along, it was definitely to take revenge for them. Gu Tongyu had a melancholic gaze and exchanged glances with Xiao Siluo. It was clear that he had guessed this as well. Xiao Siluo said hurriedly, Sect Master, both of us understand your intentions. However, you must not put yourself at risk for us. The Martial Tao Prime Body waved it off and interrupted Xiao Siluo. Your matter is only one of the reasons. I have another motive for heading to the Nine Firmament Meet. I'll go too. Yen Beichen said coldly. He did not ask the Martial Tao Prime Body why the latter wanted to head there, nor did he intend to. He merely knew that no matter what the Martial Tao Prime Body did or how strong his opponents were, he would choose to fight alongside the Martial Tao Prime Body. There's no way I'm going to miss such a lively event. Demonis G chuckled. Back in the Fiend Cave, both of us managed to escape death. What's there to fear for a mere Nine Firmament Meet? Amitba. Mingzhen chanted the Buddhist proclamation softly. I'll go too. Heavenly Wolf was extremely resistant and was initially feigning ignorance at a corner. At that moment, when he saw everyone in the hall stand out, he could not help but roll his eyes. You guys just love to put on strong fronts. When the time comes, you won't even know how you're killed. Heavenly Wolf cursed internally before probing, should I stay back and guard our base? The Martial Tao Prime Body did not give Heavenly Wolf any choices. In a flash, he rode on the ladder's back. All right, everyone, follow me. Just watch from the side. Nobody is to attack without my orders. Brother Feng, please take care of the others when the time comes. The Martial Tao Prime Body added. Among everyone, the Thunder Monarch was the only one who could protect himself since he was already at the Grotto Heaven realm. After everything was arranged, the Martial Tao Prime Body brought the 7 Emotions Fiend Generals and left Tianhuang's sect stealthily, heading in the direction of the Builder Tree. Chapter 2603, Chapter 2603, Threat. Chapter 2603, Threat. 8 days after the 9 firmament meet, at the peak of the builder tree. The morning light shone slowly on the builder tree and enveloped the perfected immortal and arhat rankings. The names of the 20 paragons on the ranking shone brightly, representing supreme glory that countless cultivators looked forward to. From this day forth, only the top 100 cultivators of the perfected Immortal and Arhat rankings respectively were qualified to cultivate beneath the builder tree. Most cultivators could only stay on the peak of the builder tree. The 20 paragons on the perfected Immortal and Arhat rankings had already recovered after a night of rest. They were invigorated and stood up one after another. Rank 2 of the perfected Immortal ranking, Qin Su, walked straight towards the side of the divine firmament immortal domain. Initially, Yun Zhu was about to head to the builder tree. When she saw Qin Su walking over, she could not help but frown slightly. She glanced at Su Zimo, who was not far away, and stopped in her tracks. Sensing something, Jun Yu stopped as well. Qin Su passed through the crowd and stood in front of Su Zimo, looking down at the latter, who was sitting on the ground. Su Zimo. Qin Su called out. Su Zimo was resting with his eyes closed. He had long sensed Qin Su's arrival but ignored him. It was only when Qin Su spoke that he opened his eyes slowly. He did not get up and merely asked indifferently, "Is there anything?" A cold glint flashed through the depths of Qin Su's eyes. As a prince, what sort of status did he possess? Furthermore, he was a perfected immortal who had just obtained rank 2 on the perfected immortal ranking. Yet, this heaven immortal from the lower worlds before him did not even stand up to greet him. Qin Su recovered quickly and smiled. Su Zimo, I'm here this time round to make a deal with you. For you, this will be something that will help you gain a meteoric rise. Su Zimo's expression was unchanged, as though he was unmoved. Through his spirit perception, he could sense the hostility in the depths of Qin Su's heart, although the latter was smiling. As a prince, Qin Su came from a noble background and had a powerful bloodline. He looked down on cultivators from the lower worlds from the bottom of his heart. Although it seemed like he was discussing a deal with Su Zimo, there was a hint of arrogance in his tone. Instead, it seemed like he was giving alms to Su Zimo. Qin Su said, "I'll get straight to the point. As long as you're willing to offer the pure jade manual, you'll be able to gain the friendship of the Qin family. No matter what happens in the future, you can look for me at Grand Firmament Palace. Of course, if you choose to leave Heaven and Earth Academy and join Grand Firmament Palace, I'll consider it as well. In fact, I can take you in as a disciple and teach you personally. You might even get the chance to cultivate the Dermic Tao of the Grand Pure Jade Manual." Su Zimo sneered internally. Qin Su wanted him to hand over the Pure Jade Manual with just a promise. Not interested. Su Zimo rejected without hesitation. Qin Su's expression darkened. Narrowing his gaze slightly, he said slowly, "You should know that I'm bent on getting my hands on the Pure Jade Manual in your possession. There are many ways for me to deal with you. You had better cherish this chance that I'm giving you, or it'll be too late for regrets." Qin Su was no longer concealing his motives and was even openly threatening him. "What are you trying to do?" Yun Zhu could not take it anymore. She stood in front of Su Zimo and mocked. "As a prince and a perfected immortal, how dare you threaten a heaven immortal? Do you have any shame? Heaven and Earth Academy is not invisible, you know." Mo Qing stood out as well. Turning around, Jun Yu came before Qin Su with a cold gaze. "Qin Su, do you want to continue fighting? If you have the guts, don't get the Immortal Kings to save you this time round." In the blink of an eye, the 3 fairies stood out. One of them was even rank 1 of the perfected immortal ranking this time round, the supreme perfected immortal, Jun Yu. The pressure on Qin Su increased exponentially. After a moment of silence, Qin Su shrugged his shoulders and suddenly smiled. It's just a casual remark. Why are you guys taking it so seriously? With that said, Qin Su turned and walked towards the builder tree. On the side of the pure land of bliss, Shi Wunyan looked in Su Zimo's direction deeply. Qin Su was not the only one. Shi Wunyan had noticed Su Zimo as well. The Great Mount Meru seal was a secret skill exclusive to Mount Meru of the Pure Land of Bliss. Su Zimo obtained the dermic formulation of the secret skill and was able to cultivate the Great Mount Meru seal to such an extent, it was clear that he had obtained the legacy of an accomplished monk of the Buddhist monasteries. Since it was a legacy of the Buddhist monasteries, he should be the one most qualified to inherit it. The small commotion here calmed down before long. The 100 perfected immortals and 100 arhats moved one after another and arrived beneath the builder tree under countless envious gazes. After everyone sat down, a fairy from the elixir firmament immortal domain stood out and smiled gently. There's plenty of time. There's no need for everyone to be in a hurry to cultivate. I'm good at tea and can serve a cup of fragrant tea for everyone. All right. Shi Gu, rank 8 of the perfected immortal ranking, burst into laughter. I've long heard that Fairy Luohua's tea brewing skills are unparalleled. To think that we would be lucky enough to have a taste of it today. Qin Su, Sword Immortal Yuhua and the others nodded as well. Shi Wunyan and the other arhats did not reject the immortal tea as well. Fairy Luohua smiled gently and took out a tea set that she had prepared long ago from her storage bag, brewing tea skillfully. The boiling spirit spring was injected with fresh tea leaves. It was misty and the fragrance of the tea wafted into one's nose, refreshing one's mind. The people before them, especially the 20 paragons on the perfected immortal and arhat rankings, would be the future of the 9 firmament immortal domain and pure land of bliss. If nothing went wrong, there was a high chance that the paragons on the 2 ranking lists would have a high chance of entering the Grotto Heaven realm to become immortal kings. For many people, this was a rare opportunity for them to build their networks. It was clear that Fairy Luohua was prepared for this. She wanted to get closer to everyone present, especially the paragons on the 2 ranking lists. Fairy Luohua handed the brewed immortal tea to the 20 paragons on the perfected immortal and arhat rankings personally. Thereafter, she sent the remaining immortal tea to the other cultivators one after another. Good tea. Sword Immortal Yuhua savored it carefully and praised. It's not bad indeed. Qin Su nodded slightly as well. Unfortunately, there seems to be something missing. Right then, Meng Yao smiled gently. Everyone, if you don't mind, let me play the zither as accompaniment. Do enjoy my music. Amazing. Yunmubai's eyes lit up as he clapped and smiled. Qin Su, Zhuo Wuchen and even the arhats were invigorated. As one of the 4 great fairies, zither immortal Meng Yao's reputation far surpassed Fairy Luohua. Not many of the immortals and monks present had heard Meng Yao's zither before. Now that they had the chance to listen to this immortal music, even some arhats felt emotional, let alone the perfected immortals present. In reality, Meng Yao's actions were similar to Luohua's thoughts. The people before her were all top paragons and monster incarnates of the heavenly world. If she could get to know these people, it would raise her reputation to another level. The reason why few people could hear her zither was not only because she was proud. It was because most people were useless to her and were not worthy of her playing the zither. Chapter 2604, Chapter 2604, Unable to withstand a single blow. Chapter 2604, Unable to withstand a single blow. Meng Yao sat on the ground and took out an ancient zither. She placed it horizontally across her knees and her jade-like fingers brushed across the strings gently, letting out a faint immortal sound. The moment the sound of the zither sounded, everyone was captivated and could not help but immerse themselves in it. Even the immortal tea in the hands of the cultivators became indifferent and tasteless. Although the sound of the ancient zither clearly sounded in the ears of the immortals and monks, everyone's hearts were unusually quiet. Their surroundings seemed to have become extremely empty and only the sound lingered. Meng Yao plucked the strings with her left hand to create the notes while fretting with her right. Her technique was complicated and varied, dazzling and filled with extreme precision. At times, the sound of the zither would be deep and distant, as though time was flowing, causing one to reminisce about the past. At times, it was like a heavenly sound and ethereal like an immortal. At times, it was faint and long, as though a fairy was whispering in one's ears. At times, it would be dignified and solemn, like a gigantic bell. After a long time, a song ended and lingered. The immortals and monks were still immersed in it and could not snap out of their stupor for a long time. Even Junyu nodded to herself. Although she despised certain behaviors of Meng Yao, she could not help but admit that the latter was indeed outstanding in terms of the Zither Tao. She was truly worthy of the title of the Zither Immortal. Qin Suk clapped and praised, "I've long heard that the Zither Immortal songs are untainted by the mortal world and comparable to heavenly music, and the lingering sound can even reside in one's mind for 3 days continuously. Now that I'm hearing it for myself today, you're truly worthy of your reputation. You're too kind, fellow Taoist." Meng Yao smiled gently. "Amitba." Shi Wunyan murmured softly, "Patron, the sound of your zither is moving. Impressive, impressive." Many immortals and monks stirred awake and praised. Although Meng Yao looked humble and calm, she was extremely smug internally. After the song, Meng Yao instantly became the center of everyone's attention. Fairy Luohua's immortal tea had already been forgotten by the immortals and monks. Although Fairy Luohua was indignant, she did not dare to express it and could only sit back down. When Yunzhu saw that, she smiled indifferently and was not surprised. She was in the divine firmament immortal domain with Meng Yao and was also a princess of an immortal kingdom. They had long known each other and she knew more about Meng Yao. No matter where Meng Yao went, she had a way of being the center of attraction to steal the limelight. Apart from Yunzhu, Mo Qing was also unaffected by Meng Yao's zither. Yunzhu looked at the quiet Mo Qing beside her and smiled. Mo Qing seemed to have a way of immersing herself in her own world and no one could affect her. Beneath the builder tree, the perfected immortal and arhat rankings were high and above. The paragons were gathered in a heroic manner and conversed about the world. There were even fairies all around with the soothing sound of the zither. It was a scene that one would yearn for enviously. Yunmubai, rank 6 of the perfected immortal ranking, praised, "In my opinion, fellow Taoist Meng Yao is not only the zither immortal of the divine firmament immortal domain, but also the 9 firmament immortal domain and even the entire heavenly world." "That's right." Sword Immortal Yuhua nodded and said as well, "Even compared to ancient masters of the Zither Tao, fellow Taoist Meng Yao is not inferior and even surpasses them." Rank 2 of the Arhat ranking, Wu Gaoni, suddenly said, "I heard that a Zither fiend has appeared in the fiend domain as well in this generation. She is said to be rather accomplished in the Zither Tao as well." At the mention of the Zither fiend, the smile on Meng Yao's face clearly froze. But soon, she returned to normal. "I know a little about this Zither fiend. She was originally from the divine firmament immortal domain. In a ruin, she stole an ancient zither that I took a liking to and escaped to the fiend domain without returning since." Qin Su raised his brow slightly and asked, "What zither fiend? Why haven't I heard of her before? It's just a nobody." Sword Immortal Yuhua smiled faintly. "I heard that she's just a heaven immortal. She's not worth mentioning and fellow Taoist Meng Yao is on a completely different level from her." Qin Su sneered, "A heaven immortal is worthy of being called the Zither fiend? Seems like the fiend domain is truly lacking in talents." Suddenly, Lin Lei said, "I heard that the Zither fiend's cultivation isn't weak. With her Tao companion, she's one of the 7 emotions fiend generals of Tianhuang sect." Tianhuang sect. The hearts of the cultivators skipped a beat when they heard that. Apart from Emperor Bo Sun and Fiend Emperor Apocalypse, the most notorious entity in the Fiend domain in recent years was Tianhuang's sect. It wasn't because Tianhuang's sect was strong, but because the sect master of Tianhuang's sect was truly terrifying. The supreme perfected fiend, Desolate Marshal. Zhuo Wuchen pouted his lips slightly. The so-called seven emotions fiend generals are nothing to fear. Apart from Feng Cantian, who is a fiend king, the rest of them are merely heaven immortals. On the other hand, I heard that the sect master of Tianhuang's sect, perfected fiend Desolate Marshal, is rather capable. He caused a huge ruckus at the Immortal Peach Banquet in the Jade Firmament Immortal Domain and killed thousands of perfected immortals as well as the city lords of the 5 immortal cities. Fairy Jialan suddenly asked, I heard that when this person underwent tribulation transcendence, he attracted the 10th perfected one heavenly tribulation. I wonder if it's true. Huh. Qin Su burst into laughter. Those rumors were merely created by a bunch of ruffians from the fiend domain trying to boost his reputation. Who would believe them? Even the great emperors in history only attracted the 9 of 9 heavenly tribulation. How is Desolate Marshal qualified to attract the 10th heavenly tribulation? Exactly. Sword Immortal Yu Hua nodded as well and glanced at Mo Qing, who was not far away. See, junior sister. I've long told you that this matter is way too ridiculous and can't be true. I believe it's true. Mo Qing did not argue with him and merely replied indifferently. Lin Lei said in a deep voice, regardless of whether the 10th heavenly tribulation is real or fake, Desolate Marshal's methods are indeed terrifying. Back then, I witnessed with my own eyes how the 5 city lords of the immortal cities could not withstand a single blow from him. When they heard that, the expressions of the paragons on the perfected immortal and arhat rankings darkened. The city lords of the immortal cities were all experts with a chance of fighting for the perfected immortal ranking. When Lin Lei said that the 5 city lords could not withstand a single blow from Desolate Marshal, wasn't he implying that they could not withstand a single blow either? HMNH. Qin Su harumphed coldly and mocked, that's someone from the lower worlds for you. A coward who is easily intimidated by others. What did you say? Lin Lei questioned loudly with a furious gaze. Shi Wunyan smiled gently. Desolate Marshal is the supreme perfected fiend, but our 2 domains also have our supreme perfected immortal and supreme arhat. Patron Lin Lei, why do you have to raise the reputation of others at the cost of ours? In the Battle of the Fiend Cave, all the news pointed to Fiend Emperor Apocalypse and almost no one paid attention to Desolate Marshal's existence. None of the cultivators knew that Desolate Marshal was present at that time and even killed a few immortal kings in the Fiend Cave. Jun Yu glanced in the direction of the Fiend domain and said slowly, no matter what, Desolate Marshal is a powerful and terrifying opponent. If there's a chance, I want to fight him to see who's stronger. Jun Yu loved to fight by nature and had just obtained the title of the Supreme Perfected Immortal. There were not many cultivators who were qualified to be her opponent. As the Supreme Perfected Fiend, Desolate Marshal was one of them. Qin Su sneered and stood up, pointing in the direction of the Fiend domain as he shouted, if Desolate Marshal dares to step foot into the 9 Firmament Immortal domain, I'll kill him single-handedly without you guys even making a move. Supreme Perfected Fiend? 10th Tribulation? In front of me, he'll be the one who won't be able to withstand a single blow. Is that so? Right then, a voice sounded from the depths of the Fiend domain. Chapter 2605, Chapter 2605, Confrontation. Chapter 2605, Confrontation. When they heard that voice, the cultivators beneath the builder tree shuddered and looked over. Mo Qing shuddered and her eyes were filled with disbelief. How was that possible? Was it him? He actually dared to come? Instinctively, Mo Qing looked at Yun Zhu beside her inquiringly. At that moment, Yun Zhu was a little stunned as well. Clearly, she could tell who it was and nodded to Mo Qing. Mo Qing was only truly certain after receiving Yun Zhu's reply. She looked in the direction of the fiend domain hurriedly as well. There was a bottomless immortal fiend abyss between the immortal and fiend domains. The builder tree was rooted right in the middle of the abyss. It was said that this abyss was created by Fiend Emperor Apocalypse in his rage back then, using the destruction axe and almost split the heavenly world into two. It was lucky that the builder tree existed and connected the two domains with countless roots. That was why the heavenly world was not completely separated. In the immortal fiend abyss, there were layers of fog that blocked one's vision and spirit consciousness. In the direction of the fiend domain, through the vast fog, a few figures could vaguely be seen walking over, becoming clearer. Yun Zhu turned to look at Su Zimo, who was at the peak of the builder tree, in confusion. Even with her thoughts, she could not figure out why Su Zimo would ask Desolate Marshal to rush over at this time. What was Desolate Marshal trying to do? Right now, it was the 9 firmament meet where paragons of both domains were gathered. There were also a group of immortal kings holding down the fort. Even if Desolate Marshal could suppress the perfected immortals of the two ranking lists single-handedly, how could he face the 100-odd immortal king experts present? Furthermore, there were more than 20 supreme immortal kings among them. Although Desolate Marshal possessed the Hell Suppression Tripod and could break through the void and leave this place at any moment, if the immortal kings joined forces to seal the void, that method of leaving would be severed completely. On the peak of the builder tree, many immortal kings sensed it as well and stood up one after another, looking in the direction of the fiend domain. Before long, a group of cultivators walked out of the fog. Their leader wore purple robes and a silver mask. He rode on a gigantic heavenly wolf demon beast and walked over slowly. The man and mount walked at the front, exuding a tremendous pressure. Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain. Many perfected immortals of the Jade Firmament Immortal Domain recognized the Martial Dao Prime Body right away and said hatefully, sounding both shocked and afraid in their tones. "It's Desolate Marshal?" The immortal kings present exchanged glances and frowned in surprise as well. Naturally, the immortal kings had long heard of the name Desolate Marshal. However, this was the first time for most of them to see the Martial Dao Prime Body. Their spirit consciousnesses scanned the Martial Dao Prime Body countless times but could not detect his cultivation realm. However, through the aura revealed by the Martial Dao Prime Body, the immortal kings could roughly determine that the Martial Dao Prime Body had yet to advance to the Grotto Heaven realm and was not even at the half-step Grotto Heaven realm. In the eyes of the immortal kings present, Desolate Marshal alone was not worth mentioning. It was mainly because of Emperor Bo Sun who was backing Desolate Marshal that the immortal kings were wary. Why was Desolate Marshal here? Was his action representative of the intentions of Emperor Bo Nun? Was Emperor Bo Sun nearby? The immortal king experts of the two domains exchanged glances and communicated with their spirit consciousnesses. Both sides decided to hold back for the time being and observe Desolate Marshal's next actions. Immortal Queen Ling Long frowned slightly. She found out about Desolate Marshal's true identity from the human monarch, Lin Zhan. Therefore, she glanced at Su Zimo subtly. Even she could not guess the purpose of Desolate Marshal's trip. However, she was only slightly relieved when she saw Su Zimo's calm expression, as though he was prepared. Beneath the builder tree, the perfected immortal experts were shocked and stood up one after another. They looked at the Martial Dao Prime Body who was walking over slowly with unfriendly expressions and were on guard. Desolate Marshal was the most notorious fiend in the fiend domain in recent years and none of the cultivators dared to be careless. Jun Yu locked her gaze on the Martial Dao Prime Body with fighting spirit in her eyes. Shi Wunyan glared at the Martial Dao Prime Body fixedly as well. There was a playful and interested look in his eyes, as though he wanted to make out something from the latter. Unfortunately, the martial Tao prime body wore the Mara mask and seemed to be shrouded by a mysterious fog that no one could see through. Behind the martial Tao prime body, 6 other cultivators arrived side by side. The cultivator on the left was tall and had long hair. As he strode forward, he exuded a heroic aura and his gaze was like lightning. It was Thunder Monarch. Heavenly Wrath, Feng Cantian. Feng Cantian had changed quite a bit over the years. However, many immortal kings on the side of the divine firmament immortal domain recognized him right away. When immortal Queen Ling Long saw this old friend from Tianhuang mainland, she was excited and delighted. She even wanted to get up right away. However, Feng Cantian, who was separated by the immortal fiend abyss, shook his head slightly in her direction. Immortal Queen Ling Long took a deep breath and did not act rashly. Immortal King Tsangya of the Great Jin Immortal Kingdom harumphed coldly. To think that it's Feng Cantian. How dare he appear? He managed to condense a grotto heaven and is now an immortal king after all. He must have some tricks up his sleeves. Another immortal king said. Immortal King Tsangya sneered, so what? He's just a minor grotto heaven. Immortal King and his combat strength is limited. He's worlds apart from Supreme Immortal Kings. Beside Feng Cantian was a man with a cold expression. He dragged a long saber in his hands. It was Azura Yen Beichen. Beside Yen Beichen was a beautiful and flawless girl in a pink dress. She smiled at the sight of the 9 firmament meet and almost overturned the entire world. Many cultivators looked at the girl's smile and could not help but fall into it. Evil Tao of the fiends and demons. An immortal king expert hollered and used a sound domain secret skill to wake many cultivators up. Hee hee. Demoness G was not angry as she chuckled and winked at the cultivators. Every single move, frown and smile of hers was filled with charm. Furthermore, it was imperceptible, as though it came from the depths of her heart and was revealed naturally. A young monk stood beside Demoness G. His eyes were clear and bright, seemingly filled with endless wisdom. Mingzhen. On the side of the pure land of bliss, someone from the Buddhist monasteries recognized Mingzhen and murmured in shock, "He's not dead?" Back then, apart from Mingzhen, the group of monks who entered Avicii were all buried there. Everyone thought that Mingzhen was dead as well. To think that he was still alive and had even joined Tianhuang's sect and the Fiend domain. Beside Mingzhen was a man and a woman. The man held a jade flute and had a melancholic expression. The woman carried an ancient zither in one hand and held the man's arm with the other, her eyes filled with love. From afar, it looked like an immortal couple had arrived gracefully. It's them. When the zither immortal saw the couple, her expression turned cold and killing intent flashed through the depths of her eyes. The sect master of Tianhuang's sect, Desolate Marshal, appeared at the 9 firmament meet with his 7 emotions fiend generals. This was also the first time he appeared in front of a group of cultivators and the visual impact was extremely strong. There were clearly not many people on the other end. Even with Desolate Marshal's mount, there were only 8 of them. However, the 8 of them were not disadvantaged in terms of aura against the experts of the 9 firmament immortal domain and pure land of bliss. Chapter 2606, Chapter 2606, Stepping In. Chapter 2606, Stepping In. Feng Cantian made a name for himself in the heavenly world hundreds of thousands of years ago and obtained the title of the Supreme Perfected Immortal at the 9 firmament meet. Now that he had entered the grotto heaven realm and become an immortal king, such a massive lineup could not suppress him at all. As for Heavenly Wolf, his former master was Emperor Bo Sun and he had been up against more fearsome lineups. Everything before him was nothing much. Since he had already come this far with no way out, why should he be afraid? Who are the few people beside Feng Cantian? It should be the 7 emotions fiend generals of Tianhuang's sect. Over the years, they have also risen to fame in the fiend domain. So, among the 7 emotions fiend generals, apart from Feng Cantian who is an immortal king, the rest are only heaven immortals. Fufu, I thought that they were all incredible experts. Many cultivators on the peak of the builder tree discussed. At the 9 firmament meet, most of them were experts at the perfected immortal realm. Naturally, they did not take Yen Beichun and the other heaven immortals seriously. What is Desolate Marshal and Feng Cantian doing here with a few heaven immortals? Could it be that a mere Tianhuang sect wants to go against our 2 domains? Fufu, that's if Desolate Marshal is tired of living. In the eyes of the immortals and monks, Desolate Marshal and the others on the other end of the immortal fiend abyss were truly too weak and were not worth mentioning. There were more than 100,000 perfected immortal experts and more than 100 immortal kings gathered at the 9 firmament meet. If the immortals swarmed forward together, they would probably drown Desolate Marshal and the others instantly. A cultivator lamented, however, Desolate Marshal sure is bold to dare to come to the 9 firmament meet with just a few people. The ignorant are always fearless. Another person disagreed. Beneath the builder tree. Desolate Marshal, how dare you appear at the 9 firmament meet? Qin Su looked at Desolate Marshal with a cold gaze and said slowly, do you think that the 9 firmament meet is like the peach banquet where you can come and go as you please? Qin Su had the supreme perfected immortal, supreme arhat and 200 top-tier perfected immortals by his side. Furthermore, he had a group of immortal kings holding down the fort. Naturally, he was fearless. Zhuo Wuchen withdrew his dustless sword and flicked the blade gently with his finger, letting out a clear sword hum as he said coldly, Desolate Marshal, I heard that you hold the title of Supreme. My dustless sword is keen on exchanging pointers with you. Sword Immortal Yuhua smiled gently. There's no need to use a sledgehammer to crack a nut. If he dares to come over, I'll let him witness my moon essence sword first. Desolate Marshal, you're a violent and murderous fiend. If you dare to take a step into the 9 firmament immortal domain, I shall stand out to slay you and purify you into reincarnation. Rank 4 of the Arhat ranking, Su Ba said in a deep voice. Beneath the builder tree, the immortals and monks declared bold words with torrential auras. Mo Qing could not take it anymore and could not help but sneer. If you guys have the guts, why don't you dare to cross the immortal fiend abyss and fight him? Suddenly, the surrounding voices paused. Mo Qing's words struck everyone's sore spot. Although the immortals and monks looked confident, none of them dared to cross the immortal fiend abyss rashly and take the initiative to attack the martial Dao prime body. Firstly, Desolate Marshal was notorious and was known as the Supreme Perfected Fiend. He once caused a huge ruckus at the Immortal Peach Banquet and caused a massacre in Langfeng City. That battle record was way too terrifying. Secondly, if they crossed the Immortal Fiend Abyss, it would mean that Desolate Marshal would get the initiative. Furthermore, there was an Immortal King, Feng Cantian, on the other end, who would dare to charge over rashly. Qin Su sneered, why should we go to the fiend domain? If Desolate Marshal has the guts, he should come to the 9 firmament immortal domain. I'll say it again. If Desolate Marshal dares to step into the 9 firmament immortal domain, I'll definitely make him spill blood on the spot by executing him. The moment he said that, on the side of the fiend domain, Desolate Marshal glanced at Xiao Siluo behind him and nodded slightly. Thereafter, in front of everyone, Desolate Marshal rode on Heavenly Wolf and crossed the immortal fiend abyss with Zither fiend Xiao Siluo. In the blink of an eye, Desolate Marshal had already descended on the side of the 9 firmament immortal domain and was heading in the direction of Qin Su and the others. Pust! Desolate Marshal truly dared to come over. The cultivators were shocked. Who was the one who wanted to spill my blood on the spot by executing me? The gaze of the martial Dao prime body was cold as he surveyed the crowd opposite him with an intimidating aura. Apart from Junyu, Shi Wunyan and the other cultivators on the perfected immortal ranking, everyone else averted their gazes and did not dare to meet his. The gaze of the martial Dao prime body lingered on Qin Su. Instantly, Qin Su felt immense pressure. An indescribable fear shrouded his head and he could not get rid of it. However, at that moment, he was already in a difficult position. Naturally, he could not take back the boast that he had just made. He could only grit his teeth and say in a deep voice, "I was the one who said it." Before Qin Su could finish, the martial Dao prime body had already attacked. This time round, his attack came without any warning. In a flash, the martial Dao prime body left the back of Heavenly Wolf and arrived before Qin Su instantly. Without saying anything more to Qin Su, the martial Dao prime body punched out. Nobody could describe how terrifying that punch was. His speed and strength had already reached their peak in that punch. Qin Su's pupils constricted in shock. There were many perfected immortals present, including the Supreme Perfected Immortal and Supreme Arhat. However, at that moment, he felt that everyone around him seemed to have vanished. He was the only one left against the martial Dao prime body. In reality, that was the case as well. The sudden attack of the martial Dao prime body was so fast that none of the cultivators present could react. There were so many experts surrounding the place and immortal kings holding down the fort. Nobody expected Desolate Marshal to come forth almost alone and even take the initiative to strike first. "I can't win. I can't defend against this." Instantly, those were the only thoughts in Qin Su's mind. The punch of the martial Dao prime body made him feel a long-awaited aura of death. Even in the fight for the perfected immortal ranking, he never felt such a strong sense of danger against Jun Yu's astral imprisonment. Escape. Qin Su was extremely decisive. Without hesitation, he abandoned his physical body and his essence spirit left his body. Carrying the Dao fruit and an ancient book, he fled into the distance. Bang! A single punch from the martial Dao prime body shattered Qin Su's body. The terrifying punch emitted a scorching heat. Before the flesh could reconstruct, it was burned to ashes by the searing heat of the punch. A single punch destroyed Qin Su's body completely. That was not all there was to the power of that punch. Qin Su's reaction was extremely fast. However, the moment his essence spirit escaped from his body, Su Zimo's punch descended. While shattering his body, it enveloped his essence spirit as well. That punch seemed to collapse the surrounding void. No matter how Qin Su struggled, his essence spirit and Dao fruit could not escape and could only sink deeper. Just as Qin Su's essence spirit was about to be destroyed by a single punch from the martial Dao prime body, the ancient book beside the Dao fruit suddenly shone with a resplendent light. A terrifying aura burst forth and helped Qin Su escape from danger. Chapter 2607, Chapter 2607, I'll give you a chance. Chapter 2607, I'll give you a chance. The ball of light released by the Grand Pure Jade Manual actually caused the palm of the martial Dao prime body to feel a sharp pain. The martial Dao prime body frowned slightly in surprise. The true martial Dao body had already been cultivated to the perfected realm and the power that could cause him pain definitely did not come from Qin Su. The martial Dao prime body pondered for a moment and quickly understood. As part of a taboo mystic classic, the Grand Pure Jade Manual was extremely precious. Although Qin Su had already obtained one of the three Pure Ones Jade Manual, the Emperor backing him still left a seal on the ancient book to prevent it from being taken away by outsiders. The martial Dao prime body was calm. It was good if he could get his hands on the Grand Pure Jade Manual, but it did not matter if he could not. His goal this time round was not the Grand Pure Jade Manual to begin with. With the help of the seal left behind by his father, Qin Su protected his essence spirit and carried the Grand Pure Jade Manual and Dao fruit back to the peak of the Builder Tree. He was scared out of his wits. If not for the seal left behind by his father, he would have died. Even so, he suffered immense losses. His body was destroyed by the martial Tao prime body and his flesh turned into ashes. He could not even use blood rebirth. The crowd was in an uproar. Nobody expected the martial Tao prime body to be so domineering that he would dare to attack a prince in front of everyone and even use a killing move. Less than that, no one expected that Qin Su would be forced to abandon his physical body and flee in panic after being unable to defend against a single punch from the martial Tao prime body. Qin Su was not only the son of an emperor, he was rank 2 of the perfected immortal ranking. If even he could not defend against a single punch from Desolate Martial, who else could be a match for him? Immortal King Long Night was enraged and suddenly stood up, glaring at the martial Tao prime body with a dark expression. The scene earlier on was way too sudden. It was too late for him to step in and save Qin Su. At that moment, Qin Su returned. Now, Immortal King Long Night no longer had sufficient reason to attack. After all, that was a fight between perfected immortals. As an immortal king, he cared about his dignity and could not attack Desolate Martial forcefully because of this. Furthermore, he was not certain of the situation on Desolate Martial's side right now and did not know if Emperor Bo Sun was nearby. As such, he did not dare to act rashly. The other immortal kings had the same thoughts. The fact that Desolate Martial dared to bring these people over and was so domineering and fearless meant that there was a high chance Emperor Bo Sun was nearby. Beneath the Builder Tree, Junyu, Shi Wunyan and the other immortals and monks had grim expressions and were extremely tense. They glared at the martial Tao prime body fixedly, afraid that he would attack again. The punch from the martial Tao prime body earlier on shocked everyone as well. If they were in Qin Su's position, it would be difficult for them to escape death. While the immortals and monks were stunned by the aura of the martial Tao prime body and fell into silence, as the supreme perfected immortal, Junyu stood out decisively. Enduring the immense pressure surging over from Desolate Martial, Junyu asked in a deep voice, "Desolate Martial of the Fiend Domain, may I know why you're here?" The martial Tao prime body merely punched Qin Su casually and did not continue attacking. "I heard that your 2 domains are holding the 9 firmament meet, so I came to take a look." The voice of the martial Tao prime body sounded a little deep through the silver mask. "At the same time, I've got some grudges to settle." "What grudges?" Junyu asked. "For the sake of an ancient zither, the zither immortal hunted down my subordinates, the zither and flute fiends, for many years. She even chased them all the way to the fiend domain." The gaze of the martial Tao prime body shifted and landed on Zither Immortal. "Meng Yao. Do you think that Tianhuang's sect is weak?" Meng Yao knew that she could not hide now that she was targeted by the martial Tao prime body, so she grit her teeth and stood out, asking, "Desolate Martial, what do you want?" "I'll give you a chance." The martial Tao prime body said indifferently, "Since you're known as the Zither Immortal, compete in Zither skills with my subordinate, the Zither Fiend. If you win, I'll spare your life." "Humph." Meng Yao glanced at Qiu Siluo and sneered, "What Zither Fiend? She's self-proclaimed, right? What rights does she have to compete with me in the Zither? I forgot to mention something." The martial Tao prime body did not explain and continued, "If you refuse to compete, I'll beat you to death." "You?" Meng Yao was shocked and furious, rendering her speechless. From Desolate Martial's words, it was as though killing her was as simple as crushing an ant. As one of the 4 great fairies, she had always been admired by countless cultivators like a moon surrounded by stars. Everyone was always respectful at the sight of her, afraid that they would be rude. Now, not only did Desolate Martial of the Fiend Domain treat her bluntly, he did not care for her beauty at all and said that he wanted to beat her to death. The most frightening thing was that this person did not have any reservations and was domineering. Meng Yao had no doubt that if she said no, Desolate Martial would attack without hesitation and kill her here. Junyu and the others frowned in confusion. The immortal kings on the peak of the Builder Tree had strange expressions as well. Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain was here to make Meng Yao compete with her zither skills? Meng Yao was known as the Zither Immortal and was naturally outstanding in the Zither Dao. The other party wanted to compete with Meng Yao in the Zither Dao? Fu. Sword Immortal Yuhua chuckled and shook his head gently. How ridiculous. A grade 5 Heaven Immortal wants to challenge Zither Immortal Meng Yao, who is a perfected Immortal. Qiu Siluo's cultivation realm was only at the grade 5 Heaven Immortal realm. The difference between her and Meng Yao was immense. In everyone's eyes, the two of them were on completely different levels. That's not fair, right? Mo Qing secretly sent a voice transmission to Yunju. Subconsciously, she was already on the side of the martial Dao prime body and said worriedly, the difference in their cultivation realms is so great. How can the Zither Fiend win? Yunju said deeply, if it's just a comparison of Zither skills, it doesn't have much to do with one's cultivation realm. Alright. After a moment of silence, Meng Yao agreed before sneering, since you guys are the ones asking to be humiliated, don't blame me. Meng Yao sat on the ground and placed the ancient zither horizontally across her knees. She looked at Qiu Siluo, who was not far away, and said, "Come, let me see how strong you are." The moment she said that, Meng Yao's fingertips suddenly plucked the strings of the zither. Clang! A single zither sound was enough to release a chilling killing intent. Instantly, the murderous aura on the battlefield spread and the surrounding temperature dipped. Meng Yao used her left hand to create the notes by pushing, pinching, kneading, humming, knocking and calling. With her right hand, she strummed the strings of the zither through varied and complicated techniques such as plucking, propping, swiping, lifting, hooking and brushing. Clang! Clang! The sound of the zither echoed continuously, turning more hurried. The immortals and monks beneath the builder tree seemed to be in a battlefield, surrounded by a massive army. They were ambushed on all sides with killing intents hidden. The zither song played by Meng Yao contained a strong killing intent. If the cultivators closed their eyes, they could sense that a massive army was charging over from Meng Yao's ancient zither with a deafening might. The cultivators were immersed in it and felt as though they were about to be trampled by the invisible army and sliced into pieces by countless sabers and swords. If the impact was already this strong for bystanders, it was even worse for Qiu Siluo, who was targeted by Meng Yao directly. Meng Yao's zither sound could be elegant and pleasant. Of course, it could also kill. Chapter 2608, Chapter 2608, Tear the Ranking. Chapter 2608, Tear the Ranking. Just as the emotions of the crowd were gradually stirred by Meng Yao's zither sound, a melodious sound of the zither sounded. The Zither Immortal and Zither Fiend were finally fighting. The sound of Qiu Siluo's zither was completely different from Meng Yao's. Meng Yao's zither sound was murderous and aggressive. There was no sharpness in Qiu Siluo's zither sound. Instead, there was a hint of reminiscence and memory. It was like the warm sun in winter shining down on everyone's hearts. In terms of zither technique, Meng Yao was indeed superior to Qiu Siluo. However, it was precisely because Meng Yao placed too much emphasis on the precision of her zither techniques that she was tainted with the aura of a craftsman and lacked a bit of piety towards the zither Dao. Meng Yao's zither was too utilitarian. She practiced the zither for fame, status and connections. However, the reason why Qiu Siluo practiced the zither was because she liked it. Her zither carried her Dao and its sound was moving. Meng Yao's song was a cold melody. However, Qiu Siluo's song contained her feelings. In the end, what truly touched one's heart was the deep emotion in the faint sound of the zither. Beneath the builder tree. The immortals and monks could not help but be immersed in Qiu Siluo's zither music. For a moment, they forgot where they were and could not help but reminisce about the past with different expressions. Images flashed through Mo Qing's mind. In Avicii, she suffered immense grievances and was bullied and humiliated. However, a purple-robed man with a silver mask suddenly appeared and said something to her. If there are people in the world who slander, bully, humiliate, laugh at, look down on, degrade or hate you, there's no need for you to endure or explain yourself. Just kill them. A faint smile appeared on Mo Qing's face when she recalled that. Yun Zhu recalled that back in Avicii, a refined scholar carried her and escaped. There were only a few layers of clothes between the two of them, and it was inevitable that there would be some friction and contact as he sprinted. Yun Zhu lowered her head slightly and blushed. Shi Wunyan had a conflicted expression. Sword Immortal Yu Hua seemed to have recalled something as his expression darkened and his arms trembled slightly. The perfected immortals and arhats were touched by the sound of Qiu Siluo's zither and fell into reminiscence, recalling the most unforgettable scenes of their lives. Some of them were in tears while others were delighted. Some were melancholic while others were smug. Some of them were dejected while others were invigorated. There was sadness, joy, sorrow, resentment, anger and frustration. The 7 emotions and 6 desires were all within. Although Meng Yao's zither sound was still present, it was as though everyone could no longer hear it. Even Meng Yao herself fell into some sort of reminiscence. Her eyes were bloodshot and she had a sorrowful expression as a bead-sized tear fell from the corner of her eye. Piak. The tear fell onto the sound of her ancient zither. Although the sound seemed weak, it shocked Meng Yao. Her fingers could not control their strength and with a bang, a zither string snapped. Her fingertips were cut and blood seeped out. That sound woke the immortals and monks up one after another. It was only then that everyone realized what had happened. When they were unprepared earlier on, they were completely immersed in Qiu Siluo's song and were affected by the emotions of the song. Even her opponent, Meng Yao, was not spared. Victory was decided in this zither competition. I was defeated? Meng Yao murmured in disbelief, unable to accept the reality before her. Today's defeat was a huge blow to her. This meant that from now on, she was not worthy of the title of the Zither Immortal. All the glory she had once obtained would vanish into thin air. As a peak-perfected immortal, she lost to a grade 5 heaven immortal. This matter would spread through the heavenly world within a few days. At that time, she would become the joke of the 9 firmament immortal domain. What the martial Tao prime body did was to defeat Meng Yao in her specialty. This was a devastating blow to Meng Yao's Tao heart. This was even more powerful than suppressing her directly in a head-on battle. Meng Yao sat on the spot dejectedly with a lost gaze as an ancient zither with a snapped string fell casually beside her. The martial Tao prime body leaped down from Heavenly Wolf and patted the ladder, indicating for him to carry Qiu Siluo back to the fiend domain first. Heavenly Wolf sensed that the martial Tao prime body might make a huge move and was afraid that he would be implicated. He could not wait to leave and ran to Qiu Siluo's side hurriedly. Jun Yu looked at the martial Tao prime body with a strong fighting spirit condensed in her eyes. She removed the astral chessboard on her back and said in a deep voice, "Desolate marshal of the fiend domain, I respect you for your guts. Against the paragons of the perfected immortal and arhat rankings of 2 domains, you even dared to cross the immortal fiend abyss. Now, I'll give you a chance as well. A chance for us to fight fairly. The perfected immortal and arhat rankings of the 2 domains?" The martial Tao prime body raised his head slightly and looked at the 2 bedazzling ranking lists that hung high above the builder tree, saying indifferently, "In my eyes, your 2 ranking lists are nothing but jokes." Before his sentence was finished, the martial Tao prime body merely raised his hand slightly without making any moves. Shing! Accompanied by an ear-piercing sound, the perfected immortal and arhat rankings that hovered above the builder tree were torn into 2 by a powerful external force. 2 torn ranking lists floated down slowly and the light emitted by the names of the perfected immortals on them gradually dimmed. Wah! The cultivators were enraged. That action could no longer be considered as a provocation, it was a tight slap on their faces. In front of them, the perfected Immortal and Arhat rankings were torn apart. To Desolate Marshal, the two ranking lists were merely jokes. Those words clearly showed that he did not take the paragons of the two domains seriously. How arrogant, fiend! Audacious! Desolate Marshal, the blood feud of thousands of perfected immortals in the Jade Firmament Immortal domain has to be repaid with blood. The blood of the immortals and monks surged. Even though they were afraid of Desolate Marshal's notorious reputation, they couldn't care less at that moment, and many people stood out. This time round, Sword Immortal Yu Hua was extremely smart and did not say anything. He could vaguely sense something. Right from the beginning, Desolate Marshal of the Fiend domain had not even looked at him. However, he felt goosebumps all over, as though a calamity was about to descend at any moment. If not for his dignity, he would have left this place right away. The Martial Dao Prime Body could not find an excuse to target Sword Immortal Yu Hua and was in no hurry. He was not only here today for Meng Yao and Sword Immortal Yu Hua. Desolate Marshal. Right then, Shi Wunyan spoke and asked slowly, "From what I know, the Hell Suppression Tripod is in your hands right now? And if it is?" The Martial Dao Prime Body asked without even looking at Shi Wunyan. Shi Wunyan took out a Zen staff from his storage bag and said in a deep voice, "The Hell Suppression Tripod is a sacred item of the Buddhist monasteries and must not be leaked. If you refuse to hand it over, don't blame the monks of the Buddhist monasteries for working together to suppress you." "That's right." Yun Mubai shouted as well, "There's no need to insist on having one-on-one fights with fiends of the Fiend domain. Everyone, let's attack together and kill this fiend for the sake of righteousness." The Martial Dao Prime Body was expressionless. The immortals and monks on the other end merely wanted to group up and attack him. Yet, they had to dig out a dignified excuse for them to do so. That was perfect. He could kill Sword Immortal Yu Hua through the chaos without having to find a reason as well. Chapter 2609, Chapter 2609, Buddha Dragon Elephant. Chapter 2609, Buddha Dragon Elephant. Under Shi Wunyan's instigation, the immortals and monks beneath the Builder Tree glared at the Martial Dao Prime Body murderously, prepared to attack at any moment. With the Supreme Perfected Immortal and Supreme Arhat at the front, what were they afraid of? Furthermore, there was a group of Immortal King experts holding down the fort at the back. If anything were to happen, the Immortal Kings and Heavenly Kings behind them would definitely not sit by idly. "Fiend, surrender!" Shi Wunyan hollered. At the same time, he slammed the Zen staff in his hands heavily on the ground with a loud bang. Coupled with the sound domain secret skill of the Buddhist monasteries released by him, the sound resonated and formed a powerful sound domain attack that was shocking. This was the top-tier sound domain dermic formulation of the Buddhist monasteries, Stern Admonition. If one's cultivation was not high enough and they were unprepared, their Tao hearts might collapse if they were struck by Stern Admonition. The deeper one's comprehension of Buddhism, the stronger this sound domain dermic formulation would be. In the battle for the Arhat ranking previously, Shi Wunyan suppressed all other top-tier perfected immortals with Stern Admonition alone. Naturally, Shi Wunyan did not expect to suppress Desolate Marshal with just Stern Admonition. However, it was enough as long as Desolate Marshal revealed any openings. He would seize the opportunity to release his strongest methods and attack Desolate Marshal. At that time, the other cultivators in the group would attack. Even with a single divine power, secret skill or spirit treasure each, no matter how strong Desolate Marshal was, he wouldn't be able to defend against them. However, to Shi Wunyan's disappointment, Desolate Marshal did not seem to have any reaction when he released his Stern Admonition. The silver mask was cold and the eyes beneath it were as deep as the ocean and mysterious as the starry skies. "You're too noisy." The Martial Dao Prime Body glanced at Shi Wunyan and said indifferently. No matter how strong Shi Wunyan was, he was only the Supreme Arhat. A dermic Dao of this level had no effect on the perfected true martial Dao. Bogey at all. Before his sentence was finished, the martial Dao prime body suddenly attacked. Without any unnecessary movements, he merely strode forward and punched in Shi Wunyan's direction. That punch was like a volcano eruption as raging tides slammed onto the shore. Instantly, it was as though the mountains were collapsing and the earth was cracking with an apocalyptic scene. Pust. Shi Wunyan was horrified. He finally understood why Qin Su was willing to abandon his body and turn to flee against Desolate Marshal's casual punch. This punch that suffocated him should not have existed in this world. How could a human possess such power? In a flash, countless thoughts flashed through Shi Wunyan's mind. Enveloped by that punch, he even wanted to turn and flee. But soon, he made a decision. He could not escape. Qin Su turned and fled. He managed to survive thanks to the Grand Pure Jade Manual and the power of the seal left behind by an emperor. His physical body was abandoned and completely crippled. If he made the same choice, he might not even be able to survive. The only way he could survive was to release all his trump cards without holding back and choose to defend against Desolate Marshal's punch while waiting for the reinforcements of the other cultivators. It was not as though Shi Wunyan did not have any powerful trump cards. In fact, in the competition for the Arhat ranking, no one was able to force him to use his full strength and release this trump card. At that moment, he had no other choice. Peerless Divine Power, Buddha Dragon Elephant. Shi Wunyan clasped his palms together and chanted Sanskrit, turning dignified and inviolable. Suddenly, majestic and divine Buddhas appeared around him. They were indomitable and had already materialized, emitting a blinding golden light and a tremendous might. The kasaya on every single Buddha, facial features and even the fine wrinkles on their faces, brows and eyes were extremely clear, as though Buddhas had descended. The Buddhas chanted Buddhist sutras that reverberated through the world endlessly. At the same time, divine dragons circled around the Buddhas and gigantic divine elephants appeared one after another. The divine dragons roared and the divine elephants trumpeted. It was a divine power of the Buddhist monasteries, Buddha Dragon Elephant. This is. On the peak of the Builder Tree, the green lotus true body's heart skipped a beat and his gaze intensified when he saw that. Back in Tianhuang mainland, during the final battle against Dao Lord Blood Fiend, he was lucky enough to see this divine power from Monk Daming. However, in Tianhuang mainland, Buddha Dragon Elephant was a supreme divine power. Furthermore, that supreme divine power could only be comprehended if one had extremely high attainments and deep comprehension of Buddhism. Monk Daming's Buddha Dragon Elephant was extremely similar to Shi Wunyan's. However, there were some differences. The green lotus true body was at the peak of the Builder Tree and was far away, so he could not see everything clearly. With a thought, he secretly released the spirit consonance art and established a connection with the martial Dao prime body. Through the eyes of the martial Dao prime body, he observed the divine power personally and deduced it at the same time. For that reason, the force of the martial Dao prime body's fist paused for a moment and did not continue pummeling down. If not for that, the punch of the martial Dao prime body would have turned this so-called peerless divine power and all the Buddhas, dragons and elephants into ashes alongside Shi Wunyan. However, everyone else had a different understanding of his actions. In the eyes of the other cultivators, Desolate Marshal had released a punch. Thereafter, Shi Wunyan released his peerless divine power and clashed head-on. Both parties were in a stalemate and were evenly matched. It was difficult to tell who was stronger right away. The immortals and monks were invigorated and their fear of Desolate Marshal decreased. At the very least, the scene before them proved that Desolate Marshal was not that strong and invincible. Sword Immortal Yuhua heaved a sigh of relief. I knew it. Desolate Marshal may be the supreme perfected fiend, but fellow Daoist Shi Wunyan is the perfected Arhat. They're not that much different. The others had the same thoughts. Only Chess Immortal Jun Yu frowned with a confused expression. As the only perfected immortal among everyone present who had mastered a peerless divine power, her senses were more accurate than others. Although Shi Wunyan's Buddha dragon elephant seemed powerful and terrifying, it should not have reached the level of a true peerless divine power. His Buddha dragon elephant merely touched the threshold of a peerless divine power. Similar to Yun Ting's immortal vanquishing sword, it was a quasi-peerless divine power. How could Desolate Marshal be in a stalemate with a single quasi-peerless divine power? Jun Yu felt that the scene before her was a little strange. As the supreme perfected immortal, she naturally could not be bothered to join forces with others. She merely watched coldly from the sidelines and frowned. I see. On the battlefield, the two true bodies that had established a connection through the spirit consonance art deduced at the same time and quickly analyzed the secret of Shi Wunyan's Buddha dragon elephant. Indeed, there was a high chance for Buddha dragon elephant to become a peerless divine power. However, raising this divine power to the level of a peerless divine power did not only require a deep comprehension of Buddhism. One had to reach an extremely high level in the divine powers and secret skills of the dragon and elephant races. Only by fusing the starkly different dharmic Taos of the Buddhist monasteries, the dragon and the elephant race into one could Buddha dragon elephant become a true peerless divine power. Chapter 2610, Chapter 2610, Massacre. Chapter 2610, Massacre. In Tianhuang mainland, almost all the Buddhas, divine dragons and divine elephants conjured by monk Daming's Buddha dragon elephant were phantoms. As for Shi Wunyan's divine power before him, the Buddhas had already materialized, as though their true bodies had descended. It was the same for the divine dragons. They circled around the Buddhas and rode on clouds, no different from true dragons. Only the divine elephants beside the Buddhas did not materialize, although they looked lifelike. Instead, they were phantoms that were less robust and agile. Su Zimo was certain that Shi Wunyan had extremely deep attainments in the dharmic Tao of the Buddhist monasteries and the dragon race. However, he did not have a deep understanding of the dharmic Tao of the elephant race and did not meet the requirements. Therefore, his Buddha dragon elephant merely touched the threshold of a peerless divine power and was not considered a true peerless divine power. Su Zimo was delighted when he deduced the secret of the Buddha dragon elephant. The Green Lotus true body cultivated the taboo mystic classic of the Buddhist monasteries, the Prajna Nirvana Sutra. Therefore, he definitely had no issue with the dharmic Tao of the Buddhist monasteries. As for the essence spirit of the Green Lotus true body, it was synthesized with the Dragon Phoenix essence spirit to begin with and controlled many divine powers and secret skills of the dragon race. In terms of comprehension of the dharmic Tao of the dragon race, he had even surpassed many true dragons. He had dabbled in the dharmic Tao of the elephant race as well. His innate divine power, the six-tusked divine strength, came from the elephant race. Furthermore, back in the Emperor's tomb, after killing Fang Xian, he obtained a high-quality cultivation technique, the divine elephant breathing technique. It also contained many dharmic Taos of the elephant race. Back then, Fang Xian relied on this cultivation technique to attract the 4 of 9 heavenly tribulation to ascend. He even cultivated the bloodline of the divine elephant and was extremely strong. After the Green Lotus true body obtained this cultivation technique, he cultivated for many years as well and comprehended something. In other words, the foundation of the Buddha dragon elephant that he cultivated even surpassed Shi Wunyan. There was a high chance that he could cultivate Buddha dragon elephant into a peerless divine power. In the eyes of others, Shi Wunyan and Desolate Marshal were in a stalemate. However, nobody expected that Su Zimo was deducing and comprehending the dharmic Tao of Buddha dragon elephant in that few breaths. On the battlefield, Shi Wunyan looked at the clear and bright eyes of the martial Tao prime body beneath the silver mask and suddenly felt an indescribable sense of familiarity. He did not think too much about it and sneered, "That's all there is to the Supreme Perfected Fiend." You're still restrained by my peerless divine power. Your Buddha dragon elephant is not at the level of a peerless divine power. The martial Tao prime body said indifferently. So what? Shi Wunyan said, a single quasi-peerless divine power is enough to defend against you. You're way too naive. A mocking look flashed through the eyes of the martial Tao prime body. When he saw that gaze, Shi Wunyan suddenly felt uneasy. Everyone, Nat, are you waiting? Torque, hurry and attack and join Torques to rill this fiend. Without hesitation, Shi Wunyan growled. Right then, the voice of the martial Tao prime body suddenly sounded in his mind. Shi Wunyan, if you want to discuss Buddhism with me, do it in your next life. You are. As though he recalled something, Shi Wunyan's pupils constricted and he was shocked. He had only told a single person that he wanted to discuss Buddhism. Rank 1 of the heaven ranking, Su Zimo of the divine firmament immortal domain. Instantly, as though he understood many things, he looked at the martial Tao prime body with shock and fear. His mouth was agape, as though he wanted to shout or say something. Unfortunately, he no longer had the chance. After Su Zimo deduced the secret of Buddha dragon elephant, Shi Wunyan was no longer of any use to him. Suddenly, the martial Tao prime body exerted strength and his initially idle fist released a shocking divine power once more, shattering Shi Wunyan's Buddha dragon elephant with ease. Poof! The martial Tao prime body smashed Shi Wunyan's head with a single punch and a blood mist spread, destroying his essence spirit on the spot. The supreme Arhat, Shi Wunyan, was dead. At that moment, the divine powers, secret skills, spirit treasures and weapons of the immortals and monks beneath the builder tree had already descended, attacking the martial Tao prime body in an overwhelming manner. Apart from Yun Zhu, Mo Qing and Lin Lei, almost all the perfected immortals and arhats released their strongest attacks. Sword shadows appeared one after another from the dustless sword and its sharpness was revealed. It was filled with a pure sword intent, as though it wanted to cleanse the world of all dust. Shi Gu gripped his gigantic dagger axe with both hands and charged toward Su Zimo. Yun Mubai summoned his 9 tribulations pure yang spirit treasure, a silver-white umbrella that could be used both offensively and defensively. It opened up all of a sudden and the sharp edge of the immortal umbrella spun rapidly, slicing towards the martial Tao prime body. The experts on the Arhat ranking summoned their sentient dermic treasures one after another and released their divine powers and secret skills with ferocious attacks. 0M. Ma. Ni. Pa. Mi. Ham. Many Arhats chanted Sanskrit of the Buddhist monasteries at the same time, forming an incomparably vast sound domain secret skill. They interacted and resonated, causing their might to increase as they surged towards the martial Tao prime body. Scram! Suddenly, the martial Tao prime body opened his mouth and let out a deafening roar in the direction of the many Arhats. Instantly, millions of living beings seemed to appear behind the martial Tao prime body and shouted at the immortals and monks present in a deafening manner. Bang! 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 Dozens of cultivators beneath the builder tree could not defend against the impact and were shattered by the roar of the martial Tao prime body. Broken limbs flew everywhere. Some cultivators were shocked to death on the spot and their essence spirits were destroyed. The cultivators beneath the builder tree were the top 200 paragons of the 2 domains and the strongest perfected immortals. Even so, none of them could defend against the impact of the sound domain attack. A single roar had already destroyed the attacks of the immortals and monks. Of course, under the deliberate control of the martial Tao prime body, Yun Zhu, Mo Qing and Lin Lei were almost unaffected. The attacks released by the cultivators almost collapsed before they even landed on the martial Tao prime body. By the time the dustless sword approached, the sword technique was already flickering and its strength was depleted. The martial Tao prime body grabbed the dustless sword in reverse and exerted strength in his palm. Crack! There was a crisp sound. The dustless sword was shattered into pieces by the palm of the martial Dao Prime body and scattered on the ground. Zhuo Wuchen's expression changed starkly. The dustless sword was a grade 9 pure yang spirit treasure. To think that it would be snapped by desolate martial's bare hands. What sort of power was that? After the martial Dao Prime body broke the sword, he punched in reverse. Zhuo Wuchen's eyes widened and he could not dodge the incoming punch no matter what. Bang! Zhuo Wuchen was turned into a blood mist by a single punch from the martial Dao Prime body. Before he could splatter on the ground, he was burned to ashes by the searing heat contained in the fist of the martial Dao Prime body, and his essence spirit was destroyed. At that moment, the Arhats closed in as well. Without even looking, the martial Dao Prime body punched back. Poof! That punch caused the void to collapse. 5 Arhats fell into it and could not break free, enveloped by the fist force of the martial Dao Prime body. Poof! 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 All 5 Arhats died, killed by a single punch of the martial Dao Prime body. Chapter 26:11, Chapter 26:11, Defeating Grotto Heaven. Chapter 26:11, Defeating Grotto Heaven. The situation had changed way too suddenly. Earlier on, Desolate Martial and Shi Wunyan were evenly matched. To think that Shi Wunyan would be killed by a single punch from Desolate Martial in the blink of an eye. Shi Wunyan's defeat came too quickly and suddenly. The Immortal King experts on the peak of the Builder Tree could not react for a moment. The heavenly kings of the pure land of bliss were shocked and enraged when they saw that. Shi Wunyan was from Mount Meru of the pure land of bliss. He was the strongest of the Buddhist monasteries in this generation and had just been conferred the title of the Supreme Arhat. Who would have thought that Shi Wunyan would be killed on the spot by Desolate Martial of the Fiend Domain the second day after obtaining the title of the Supreme Arhat? Shi Wunyan would most likely become the Supreme Arhat who died the fastest in history. By the time the heavenly kings returned to their senses, the battle had already broken out. The martial Dao Prime body attacked consecutively and none of the perfected immortal paragons of the 2 domains were his match. Blood flowed like rivers beneath the Builder Tree. The 200 perfected immortals and arhats who could cultivate beneath the Builder Tree could be considered as the future, foundation and hope of the 2 domains. They were the most outstanding successors of the major sects and factions. When they saw the paragons and successors die one after another, the immortal kings and heavenly kings of the major sects and factions could no longer sit still. No matter what, they had to save their successors first. If Desolate Martial were to continue pushing forward, not many of the 200 perfected immortal paragons would survive. The supreme immortal kings of the 2 domains maintained their composures. It was enough for ordinary immortal kings to step in for something like this. If a supreme immortal king were to step in just to deal with a supreme perfected fiend, it would be too much. Just as the martial Dao Prime body was about to take advantage of the chaos to kill Sword Immortal Yu Hua in the crowd, 3 immortal kings and 4 heavenly kings descended and blocked his path. 7 Grotto Heaven realm experts arrived on the battlefield and released a tremendous spirit consciousness pressure, locking onto the figure of the martial Dao Prime body. Fiend, hurry and stop. The lust for blood is boundless, but you can still repent. Lay down the butcher's knife and you shall gain the chance of redemption to become a Buddha. A heavenly king of the Buddhist monasteries chanted Sanskrit and raised his wooden mallet at the same time, knocking heavily on the wooden fish in his hands with a heart-wrenching sound. 2 other immortal king experts extended their palms and suppressed the martial Dao Prime body as well. Humph. Against the attacks of Grotto Heaven realm experts, the martial Dao Prime body did not retreat but advanced instead. With a cold harumph, he raised his fist and punched twice, colliding against the palms of the 2 immortal king experts. When they saw that, a ridiculous and strange feeling rose in the hearts of the cultivators. They did not know if Desolate Martial of the Fiend Domain was a lunatic or out of his mind. Wasn't he committing suicide by fighting against Immortal King experts barehanded? Bang! Bang! The two Immortal Kings attacked at an extremely fast speed but retreated even faster. In the blink of an eye, two Immortal Kings were sent flying by two punches from the Martial Dao Prime Body. The two Immortal Kings were shocked. The moment they collided with the Martial Dao Prime Body, they felt an almost destructive divine power surge into their bodies wildly. The two of them could not defend against it at all. Creak! The two Immortal Kings felt a sharp pain in their arms and the sound of bones cracking could be heard. Under countless gazes, the flesh on the arms of the two Immortal Kings were torn and their bones were broken into pieces, bursting into a blood mist. Their organs were shaken violently as well as they coughed out large mouthfuls of blood with dispirited expressions. Pust! The cultivators gasped in shock. During normal cultivation, Immortal King experts would use the grotto heavens they condensed to nourish their bodies and bloodline. Their physiques were strong and their strength was shocking, far surpassing the perfected one realm. But now, two Immortal Kings were severely injured by two punches from a perfected fiend in melee combat. What sort of power was that? How strong was Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain? The remaining Immortal King and 4 Heavenly Kings were shocked by what happened as well. The 5 Grotto Heaven Realm experts had a tacit understanding and summoned their minor Grotto Heavens without hesitation. Boom! 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 The 5 Grotto Heaven Realm experts released their minor Grotto Heavens and did not dare to hold back at all. They channeled their Immortal King Realm combat strength to the peak. The troublesome and terrifying nature of the methods of Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain had already exceeded their imagination. They did not want to suffer a huge loss in the hands of Desolate Marshal in front of everyone. The Martial Dao Prime Body looked at the Immortal King and 4 Heavenly Kings with a cold gaze and a shuddering sinister aura. Immediately after, the Martial Dao Prime Body channeled his blood chi and the deafening sound of a tsunami echoed from his body as his aura surged. 2 purple flames burned in his eyes as well. They were deep and bright and could not be ignored. The next moment, the Martial Dao Prime Body strode forward once more and punched out against the 5 Immortal King experts. That punch enveloped the Immortal King and 4 Heavenly Kings. It exploded like fire and surged like the sea. Although that punch seemed simple, it condensed all the Dharmic Dao and will of the Martial Dao. It was unyielding and resisting. It was true to the heart and allows one to exact revenge and repay gratitude as they pleased. This was a simple punch without any unnecessary movements. The Dao was simplicity itself. The Prime Body's fist was the Martial Dao. All the Dharmic Dao and power of the perfected true Martial Dao body were gathered on that punch. Boom! The fist of the Martial Dao Prime Body collided with the 5 Grotto Heavens opposite him and the surrounding void trembled. Immediately after, the gazes of the Immortal King and 4 Heavenly Kings changed gradually. The 5 of them looked at the Martial Dao Prime Body in shock and fear as Tnon Ne were 100k one-ing at a Goa. Bang! Boom! Right in front of everyone, the Grotto Heavens that the 5 of them had just propped up were crushed by a single punch from the Martial Dao Prime Body and collapsed into nothingness. Wah! The cultivators widened their eyes in shock and disbelief. This scene had already exceeded the understanding of the cultivators. The power of the Supreme Perfected Fiend could already cross the Perfected One and Grotto Heaven realm to reach such a terrifying level. Even the Supreme Immortal Kings on the peak of the Builder Tree stood up instinctively in shock. Given their sharpness, they could naturally tell that Desolate Marshal's punch earlier on did not involve the power of a Grotto Heaven. In other words, Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain had yet to advance to the Grotto Heaven realm. That punch merely made use of the power released by his body and bloodline. Even so, it was already so terrifying. Although the Immortal King and 4 Heavenly Kings had only condensed minor Grotto Heavens, the minor Grotto Heaven was still the strongest technique of Grotto Heaven experts. How could it be destroyed by a single punch? Even for them, it was difficult for them to do that without releasing their major grotto heavens. When the 5 minor grotto heavens collapsed, the Immortal King and 4 heavenly kings were shocked. They no longer dared to stand in front of the martial Tao prime body as they retreated hurriedly to avoid him. 7 grotto heaven experts had just charged forward when they were dispersed by a few punches from the martial Tao prime body. The moment the 7 immortal kings retreated, the perfected immortal paragons beneath the builder tree were exposed to the martial Tao prime body once more. The gaze of the martial Tao prime body shifted and landed on Sword Immortal Yuhua. Pust. Instantly, Sword Immortal Yuhua felt his hairs stand on end and his scalp tingle. Even his body no longer seemed to be within his control. He was targeted. Chapter 26:12, Chapter 26:12, You, Re Not My Match. Chapter 26:12, You, Re Not My Match. Sword Immortal Yuhua felt extremely wronged. Under the instigation of Shi Wunyan, Zhuo Wuchen and the others, more than half of the cultivators beneath the builder tree attacked the martial Tao prime body. There were very few cultivators who did not attack the entire time, and he was one of them. Yun Zhu and Mo Qing knew the martial Tao prime body and would naturally not attack. As the supreme perfected immortal, Jun Yu was embarrassed to join forces with others and did not move. The reason why Sword Immortal Yuhua did not attack was simple. It was because his sixth sense was telling him that a huge calamity was about to befall him. Furthermore, for some unknown reason, he had a feeling that Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain was going to make a move on him. The reason why Sword Immortal Yuhua did not attack was because he was afraid that he would do something that would give Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain a reason to attack. However, he did not expect that although he behaved himself and did not lay a single finger on Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain, he was still targeted in the end despite having no feud with the latter. Sword Immortal Yuhua was puzzled, indignant and aggrieved. Earlier on, Desolate Marshal unleashed his fiend nature and even immortal kings of the Grotto Heaven realm were severely injured by him. What could a rank 9 of the perfected immortal ranking like him do? Desolate Marshal could probably crush him with a single finger. Sword Immortal Yuhua was in no mood to defend. Without hesitation, he turned and fled while shouting for help in the direction of the peak of the builder tree. Trying to escape. The martial Tao prime body sneered and in a flash, sped towards Sword Immortal Yuhua at an extremely fast speed. No one dared to stop him wherever he passed. Right then, a figure flashed before him, mysterious as though it was carrying a vast starry sky on its back. The supreme perfected immortal, Jun Yu, had appeared. She was unwilling to join forces with others to deal with the martial Tao prime body. Right now, she was the only one who dared to stand out and block the path of the martial Tao prime body as well. When she saw that, Mo Qing was alarmed and worried about Jun Yu's safety. After all, in her opinion, Desolate Marshal was fearless in his actions. He came from the Fiend Domain and was decisive to kill. Even immortal kings who stood in his way were suppressed by him. What could Jun Yu do? Don't worry. Right then, Yun Zhu's voice sounded in Mo Qing's mind with conviction. Nothing will happen to Jun Yu. Yun Zhu knew the identity of the martial Tao prime body. That was the reason why she was certain that the martial Tao prime body would definitely not hurt Jun Yu. When he saw Jun Yu blocking his way, the martial Tao prime body paused for a moment and said indifferently, "You're not my match." Before his sentence was finished, the martial Tao prime body had already attacked. Unlike his previous attacks, this time round, the martial Tao prime body did not release any apocalyptic punch. He merely closed 2 fingers and formed a finger sword, piercing towards Jun Yu's glabella. Before the finger sword arrived, Jun Yu felt her glabella swell slightly and a sharp pain. Indeed, he's very strong. Jun Yu thought to herself. Against Desolate Marshal, she did not dare to hold back either. She conjured hand seals with both hands and pointed gently in the direction of the marshal. Tao prime body, shouting softly, astral imprisonment. Jun Yu did not hold back and released that peerless divine power right away. A powerful and mysterious power descended instantly. Everything in the space could not move and the passage of time could not be sensed. The air around the martial Dao prime body seemed to have quietened down instantly. However, before long, a purple halo burst forth from the perfected true martial Dao body. It shone with countless mysterious runes and the martial Dao prime body broke free from astral imprisonment instantly. To be precise, he did not break free. That peerless divine power did not affect the martial Dao prime body much. The entire situation was like a chess game. Jun Yu was disadvantaged after that single move. The martial Dao prime body had already arrived before Jun Yu and his finger sword hovered above her glabella, ready to spit out sword chi with killing intent at any moment. In a flash, Jun Yu moved diagonally to the back. Her movement technique was strange and extremely mysterious. The 9 palace subtle steps of Immortal Queen Ling Long. Speed was not the focus of the 9 palace subtle steps. However, in a battle, one could often survive through deadly situations and find new openings. Jun Yu released the 9 palace subtle steps and intended to distance herself from the martial Dao prime body for the time being before making further plans. However, the moment Jun Yu dodged to the side, the martial Dao prime body moved and followed her, as though he was tearing through the voids. The two of them were almost one after another and there was no gap between them. The finger sword of the martial Dao prime body was still hovering above Jun Yu's glabella. Jun Yu's heart skipped a beat as she hurriedly released the 9 palace subtle steps once more, wanting to break free from the pursuit of the martial Dao prime body. However, the martial Dao prime body followed suit like a shadow. How is that possible? Jun Yu was alarmed. Desolate Martial could resolve the 9 palace subtle steps and even follow them? I've already said that you're not my match. The martial Dao prime body emphasized once more. In a flash, he chased in the direction of Sword Immortal Yu Hua. Don't leave, the outcome has yet to be decided. Jun Yu took a step forward, wanting to stop the martial Dao prime body. However, she suddenly felt a trace of warmth flowing down from her glabella. Instinctively, Jun Yu touched it and her hands were filled with blood. Her glabella was pierced. In other words, earlier on, Desolate Martial could have pierced her essence spirit if he had taken a single inch forward with his finger sword. However, why did Desolate Martial not kill her although he had already gone on a rampage? Jun Yu could vaguely sense that Desolate Martial seemed to treat her differently. At the very least, he did not release overly ferocious and terrifying attacks. Instead, he held back. Suddenly, Jun Yu felt a sense of helplessness. The difference between them was way too great. In front of Desolate Martial of the Fiend Domain, even her fighting spirit was suppressed so badly that she could no longer raise her head fully. Although there was a slight delay, the martial Dao prime body was extremely fast. Just as Sword Immortal Yu Hua was about to arrive at the Builder Tree Mountain Range, he caught up to the ladder. Phew! Without a second word, the martial Dao prime body punched out. Suddenly, in the void beside Sword Immortal Yu Hua, a crack appeared and a white-haired old man appeared in a flash. He glared at the martial Dao prime body and shouted, "Fiend, how dare you injure a disciple of our academy?" The Grand Elder of Heaven and Earth Academy had descended. Although the Grand Elder of the Academy was old, he had a major grotto heaven after all and was a supreme immortal king. When he saw that ordinary immortal kings could not stop the martial Dao prime body at all, the Grand Elder of the Academy could not sit still and could only appear personally. No matter what, Sword Immortal Yu Hua was the #1 legacy disciple of the Academy and they could not afford to lose him. The Grand Elder of the Academy extended his slightly scrawny palm and clenched it into a fist, channeling his bloodline to collide with the fist of the martial Dao prime body. Bang! The fists collided with a dull sound of defeat. Neither of them retreated a step back. A cold glint flashed through the eyes of the martial Tao Prime Body as he looked at Sword Immortal Yu Hua, who was escaping wildly towards the peak of the Builder Tree. He channeled his essence spirit and circulated his divine powers and dermic arts, pointing at Sword Immortal Yu Hua from afar. Eternal damnation. A peerless divine power was released. The martial Tao Prime Body rarely used divine powers or secret skills in battle. It was not because he had not mastered them, but because most of the time, there was no need for him to do it. His divine powers and secret skills were long fused into his true martial Tao body. The moment the martial Tao Prime Body released a divine power, it was a peerless divine power, that caused a commotion. Sword Immortal Yu Hua turned back with a pale expression and despair in his heart. Given his strength, he could not withstand the peerless divine power at all. Furthermore, eternal damnation was even more terrifying than astral imprisonment in terms of killing power. The Grand Elder of the Academy was held back by the martial Tao Prime Body and could not extricate himself for the time being. He could only wave his robes and release a powerful secret skill that charged towards eternal damnation. Chapter 26:13, Chapter 26:13, Punishment. Chapter 26:13, Punishment. Eternal damnation originated from the final heavenly tribulation of the 9 of 9 heavenly tribulations. A myriad of heavenly tribulations transformed into countless runes that emitted a destructive aura and descended, covering the skies densely. There was the Formation Tribulation, Residency Tribulation, Destruction Tribulation, Emptiness Tribulation, Fire Tribulation, Water Tribulation, Wind Tribulation, Weapon Tribulation. Each tribulation evolved into countless minor tribulations, 3 calamities, 9 catastrophes and 10 negative karma tribulations. Like a tsunami of heavenly tribulations, they surged and devoured toward Sword Immortal Yu Hua. Instantly, an apocalyptic scene appeared above Sword Immortal Yu Hua's head. In the tsunami of heavenly tribulations, Sword Immortal Yu Hua trembled slightly and looked incomparably insignificant. The sharpness of the true essence on his body was already torn into pieces. Sword Immortal Yu Hua endured the pressure with bloodshot eyes. As though he was giving it his all, he channeled his Tao Fruit Essence spirit and condensed his true essence, releasing divine powers and secret skills one after another. However, his divine powers and secret skills surged into the tsunami of heavenly tribulations like a rock entering the sea. They did not cause any ripples and vanished in the blink of an eye. In the face of the peerless divine power, all his counterattacks were insignificant. Right then, the secret skill of the Grand Elder of the Academy descended and a heavenly encompassing palm appeared above Sword Immortal Yu Hua's head, supporting the surging tsunami of heavenly tribulations. Although the peerless divine power was strong, the martial Tao Prime Body was restricted by his cultivation realm, and eternal damnation could not injure a supreme immortal king like the Grand Elder of the Academy. However, the tsunami of heavenly tribulations surged continuously, wanting to flow through the gaps between the fingers of the heavenly encompassing palm and continue to threaten Sword Immortal Yu Hua. Humph. The Grand Elder of the Academy harumphed coldly and suddenly exerted strength in his heavenly encompassing palm, gripping it into a fist. Boom! The tsunami of heavenly tribulations suddenly exploded and a loud bang sounded in midair. The grab of that heavenly encompassing palm contained the terrifying power of a supreme immortal king and destroyed the divine power of eternal damnation instantly. Sword Immortal Yu Hua was right beside the heavenly encompassing palm and eternal damnation. The aftershock of the collision of the two powers surged and formed a storm that engulfed him instantly. Sword Immortal Yu Hua shrieked. Although eternal damnation was destroyed by the Grand Elder of the Academy, there were still many dilapidated heavenly tribulations and damaged runes that retained the dermic Tao of the peerless divine power. Naturally, such a dermic Tao posed no threat to an immortal king. But, Sword Immortal Yu Hua was only a perfected immortal and could not defend against it at all. If the Grand Elder of the Academy had not chosen to fight eternal damnation head-on and merely blocked it, Sword Immortal Yu Hua would have had a chance to escape. However, the Grand Elder of the Academy chose to take the peerless divine power head-on. The aftershock spread and it was too late for Sword Immortal Yu Hua to escape. In the blink of an eye, wounds appeared on Sword Immortal Yu Hua's body. Some of them were so deep that his bones could be seen, and some of them even revealed his organs in a shocking manner. The most tragic thing was that one of Sword Immortal Yu Hua's arms made contact with a shattered rune of the weapon Tribulation and it was forcibly severed. Sword Immortal Yu Hua fell to the ground and his body convulsed continuously, letting out a tragic cry. He was covered in blood and did not even look like a human anymore. When the Grand Elder of the Academy saw the tragic state of Sword Immortal Yu Hua, his expression changed. He propped up his major grotto heaven and repelled the martial Dao prime body, arriving beside Sword Immortal Yu Hua instantly. The Grand Elder of the Academy took out a few immortal pills and sent them into Sword Immortal Yu Hua's mouth. Thereafter, he conjured hand seals consecutively and released a few healing secret skills that struck Sword Immortal Yu Hua. Ah! Ah! It hurts! After a few healing secret skills, Sword Immortal Yu Hua's cries turned even more tragic. His body convulsed and his injuries showed no signs of healing. Perhaps because the immortal pills had some effect or because of the few healing secret skills of the Grand Elder of the Academy, Sword Immortal Yu Hua seemed to have regained a momentary clarity as he looked at the Grand Elder with a pleading expression. It's too painful. Hurry, kill me and give me a swift death. Sword Immortal Yu Hua's voice trembled slightly. Looking at Sword Immortal Yu Hua at the foot of the mountain, the cultivators gasped and shuddered when they heard the terrifying tragic cries. Eternal damnation. That's way too terrifying. Once he's struck by that peerless divine power, no injuries can be healed. At this rate, Sword Immortal Yu Hua won't be able to hold on for long and will be tortured to death by his injuries. One of the three great sword immortals of the Divine Firmament Immortal Domain and rank 9 of the Perfected Immortal ranking. To think that he would end up in such a state today. When the immortals and monks saw that, they were filled with emotions. Initially, everyone felt pity for Shi Wunyan and the others when they saw Desolate Marshal kill them with a single punch. But now, compared to Sword Immortal Yu Hua, Shi Wunyan and the others might have been lucky to die without any pain. Another person sighed. If he had known earlier, Sword Immortal Yu Hua wouldn't have escaped. He would have chosen to be punched to death by Desolate Marshal instead of suffering such pain and torture. Although Mo Qing was long displeased with Sword Immortal Yu Hua, she could not help but shake her head and sigh gently when she saw him in such a tragic state. Sword Immortal Yu Hua had once said in front of her, "If Desolate Marshal dares to appear in front of me, I'll definitely sever his facade and destroy his myth with a single slash." Those words seemed to have happened yesterday. It was a little ironic when she recalled that scene. Back then, even Sword Immortal Yu Hua himself had not expected that he would truly encounter Desolate Marshal and end up in such a state. Although there were many cultivators present, apart from Yun Zhu, there was probably no one else who knew why Desolate Marshal targeted Sword Immortal Yu Hua. Sword Immortal Yu Hua targeted Su Zimo repeatedly and even joined forces with outsiders to try and kill him. If he killed Sword Immortal Yu Hua directly, it would be letting the latter off too easily. The only way to punish him was to let him die in pain and torment. At the side of the Green Firmament Immortal Domain, Lin Luo looked at Sword Immortal Yu Hua, who was covered in blood and screaming repeatedly, and frowned slightly. "Mother, is there no way to dispel eternal damnation?" Lin Luo asked. Immortal Queen Ling Long said, "Of course there is, but it's very difficult unless Yu Hua can comprehend the secrets of the Grotto Heaven realm and become an immortal king. Judging from his current situation, it's difficult for him to survive, let alone attempt to advance to the Grotto Heaven realm." Lin Luo asked again, "Eternal damnation is only a peerless divine power after all. Can't the immortal kings purge and suppress that power?" "Of course we can." Immortal Queen Ling Long said, "Any immortal king present can purge eternal damnation as long as they summon their grotto heaven. However, at the same time, Yuhua won't be able to survive and will be crushed to death by the power of the grotto heaven. The dermic Tao of eternal damnation had already fused into every single wound on Sword Immortal Yuhua's body. If his essence spirit wanted to escape, it would be struck by the power of eternal damnation. Purging eternal damnation from him meant that his body, bloodline and even eternal damnation would be suppressed and crushed. Pausing for a moment, Immortal Queen Ling Long changed the topic. However, nothing is absolute. If there's an immortal king whose grotto heaven condenses endless life force, it might be able to help him dispel eternal damnation and save his life. However, there are extremely few immortal kings like that. At the very least, I've never heard of an immortal king in the heavenly world possessing such a grotto heaven. Chapter 26:14, Chapter 26:14, A Slap. Chapter 26:14, A Slap. The Grand Elder of the Academy looked at Sword Immortal Yuhua, who was in pain with a conflicted and hesitant expression. He raised his palm slowly, but it hovered in midair, unable to descend. Killing Sword Immortal Yuhua and giving him a swift death so that he would not be tormented by eternal damnation might just be the best outcome for him. However, Sword Immortal Yuhua was the #1 legacy disciple of the Academy after all, and the Grand Elder could not bring himself to do it. Yuhua, if I send you back to the Academy, the sect master might be able to save your life. As for the Grand Elder of the Academy hesitated and did not continue. He did not wish to continue inflicting blows on Sword Immortal Yuhua. Even if the sect master of the Academy could save Sword Immortal Yuhua's life, he would be more than half crippled. Sword Immortal Yuhua might even be inferior to many legacy disciples in the future, let alone advance to the grotto heaven realm to become an immortal king. Furthermore, this blow would have a huge impact on Sword Immortal Yuhua. From now on, the title of Sword Immortal Yuhua in the Divine Firmament Immortal Domain and even the entire heavenly world would be completely destroyed. The Grand Elder of the Academy sighed gently and tore through the void with Sword Immortal Yuhua, returning to Heaven and Earth Academy. Apart from him, there were more than 100 ordinary immortal kings and more than 20 supreme immortal kings watching. Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain could not escape at all. For the Grand Elder of the Academy, it was more important to save Sword Immortal Yuhua. On the side of the Green Firmament Immortal Domain, although Immortal Queen Ling Long was still seated a far distance away, her upper body was slightly straightened and she had a grim expression, looking tense. Su Zimo, if your aim was to suppress the Zither Immortal this time round, you have already achieved your goal. You should leave as soon as possible or it will be too late. Immortal Queen Ling Long sent a voice transmission to the Green Lotus True Body on the side of the Divine Firmament Immortal Domain and reminded secretly with her spirit consciousness. There's no hurry. Su Zimo replied. Immortal Queen Ling Long frowned slightly and reminded again, you have to understand that now that you have injured and forced back ordinary immortal kings, the supreme immortal kings present can no longer sit still. You just fought with the Grand Elder of the Academy. You should know that the difference in strength between ordinary immortal kings and supreme immortal kings is extremely great. I saw that you didn't gain any advantage in your clash with the Grand Elder of the Academy. In fact, I'm afraid you were even disadvantaged. Su Zimo sent a voice transmission, indeed. The power of my martial Tao Prime body is not enough to go against supreme immortal kings yet. One more thing. Immortal Queen Ling Long continued, the situation here is unlike Langfeng. City of the Jade Firmament Immortal Domain. Back then, there were no immortal kings holding down the fort and you could leave with your hell suppression tripod at any time. However, at this moment, the supreme immortal kings present can't sit still any longer. If these people join forces and seal the void, you won't be able to leave this place even if you want to summon the hell suppression tripod to break through the void. Sealing the void was something that Immortal King experts could do. Immortal Queen Ling Long was afraid that Su Zimo might not understand the pros and cons fully, so she reminded him. Since Immortal King experts could break through the void, they could naturally join forces to seal the void to prevent other Immortal King experts from leaving casually. Once the 20-odd Supreme Immortal Kings present attacked and sealed the void, even if Immortal Queen Ling Long joined the fray, she would not be able to escape with the Martial Dao Prime Body. At that time, no one would be able to save the Martial Dao Prime Body. Su Zimo had a calm expression. Thank you for your reminder, Senior Ling Long. It would be best if these Supreme Immortal Kings joined forces to seal the void. I was even afraid that they would be wary and not dare to attack the Martial Dao Prime Body. Immortal Queen Ling Long was smart and could vaguely tell that Su Zimo seemed to be implying something. However, she could not figure it out right away and said exasperatedly, "You killed perfected immortal paragons of the two domains so domineeringly and even injured a few immortal kings. Even if they have reservations, they can't sit by idly and let you do whatever you want. Do be careful." Immortal Queen Ling Long reminded again. On the battlefield, the Martial Dao Prime Body did not stop the Grand Elder of the Academy from taking Sword Immortal Yu Hua away. His heart skipped a beat and his expression turned cold when he sensed the commotion behind him. The Martial Dao Prime Body released his spirit consciousness and gathered the remaining Eternal Damnation Dermic Dao in his palm, turning it into a dark red light. Immediately after, he retreated and sped in the direction of the Immortal Fiend Abyss. After the outcome for the Zither competition between the Zither Immortal and Fiend was decided, Heavenly Wolf obeyed the orders of the Martial Dao Prime Body and carried Chiu Siluo in the direction of the Fiend domain. Thereafter, a huge battle broke out beneath the Builder Tree and the Martial Dao Prime Body went on a massacre. Out of curiosity, Heavenly Wolf turned around and looked back while heading towards the Immortal Fiend Abyss at a slightly slower speed. Just as the Martial Dao Prime Body was fighting against the Grand Elder of the Academy, Zither Immortal Meng Yao, who was initially still slumped on the ground in a daze, suddenly snapped out of her stupor. It was as though she had regained consciousness instantly. She raised her head suddenly and looked at Chiu Siluo who was in the distance with deep jealousy in her eyes. Swoosh! In a flash, Meng Yao chased after Chiu Siluo with a cold and murderous expression. When Heavenly Wolf saw Meng Yao chasing after them, he could not help but jump in shock and sprinted towards the Immortal Fiend Abyss hurriedly. However, his and Chiu Siluo's cultivation realms were only at the Heaven Immortal realm. In terms of speed, they could not compare to Meng Yao who was at the peak of the perfected Immortal realm. Just as he was about to reach the Immortal Fiend Abyss, Meng Yao caught up to him. "Your Zither skills can't compare to mine at all." Meng Yao looked at Chiu Siluo on the back of the Heavenly Wolf and felt endless indignance as she shrieked, "The reason why you can defeat me is because of the soul-reaping Zither. This ancient Zither should have been an opportunity for me. As long as I kill you and retrieve the soul-reaping Zither, I will still be the Zither Immortal and one of the four great fairies." There was no fear on Chiu Siluo's face. Instead, there was a hint of pity in the way she looked at Meng Yao. "Do you really think that your defeat was because of an external object?" Chiu Siluo asked softly. Those words pierced Meng Yao's chest like a sharp blade. She shuddered. As Chiu Siluo had said, she knew very well in the depths of her heart the reason why she was defeated. She blamed everything on the soul-reaping Zither because she was unwilling to face it. "I don't care." Meng Yao grit her teeth. "I want to take back what is mine." Meng Yao was not only referring to the soul-reaping Zither, but also all of the glory and reputation that once belonged to her. Die! Meng Yao channeled her Dao fruit and a halo appeared behind her head. Her spirit consciousness condensed and she released an essence spirit secret skill at Chiu Siluo. Right then, a figure suddenly appeared and blocked in front of Meng Yao. Her essence spirit secret skills collided against the silver mask on the figure's face and seemed to ripple before vanishing. The martial Dao prime body had arrived. You. When Meng Yao saw the mask and looked at the pair of eyes burning with purple flames behind the silver mask, her expression changed and she was so scared that she could not speak. The martial Dao prime body was expressionless as he raised his hand and slapped Meng Yao. A scarlet light flashed in his palm and entered Meng Yao's cheek. That was the remnant of eternal damnation. Chapter 26:15, Chapter 26:15, Other Schemes. Chapter 26:15, Other Schemes. Piak. The slap of the martial Dao prime body sent Meng Yao flying dozens of feet away. Initially, Meng Yao thought that she would definitely die. After all, she had just witnessed the methods of the martial Dao prime body and he could even kill Shi Wunyan with a single punch. Even the minor grotto heavens of immortal kings were shattered. No matter how tough her head was, she could not defend against the power of desolate martial's slap. However, when she was sent flying, her ears buzzed and her vision blurred. She composed herself and sat up. She was not dead. A fiend like desolate martial actually knew how to cherish women. Instantly, Meng Yao's mind was filled with thoughts. However, she quickly noticed something unusual. Many cultivators in the surroundings looked at her strangely with a hint of fear and pity. Some cultivators were even unwilling to meet her gaze and averted it. Right then, Meng Yao finally felt a tearing pain on her cheek. Instinctively, she touched it and her palm was filled with blood. Such superficial wounds had no effect on perfected immortals at all. Meng Yao channeled her essence spirit Dao fruit and circulated her bloodline, wanting to heal the injuries on her cheek. However, she quickly realized that the wound on her face could not heal. Even after she consumed a large number of immortal pills, there were no signs of recovery. Although the blood flow from the wound had stopped for the time being, there was a menacing scar on her face. Her bright red flesh was overturned and her initially beautiful face was completely torn apart. Anyone who saw that face would only feel fear and would definitely not associate her with the heavenly four great fairies. At that moment, Meng Yao finally understood why the surrounding cultivators were looking at her strangely. The two reasons why she was able to become one of the four great fairies were because of her superb zither skills and her devastatingly beautiful face. Those were also the reasons why she was proud. But now, desolate martial of the fiend domain had appeared and destroyed two of her most valued elements. Everyone knew in their hearts that what desolate martial just did was even more terrifying than killing zither immortal Meng Yao directly. This outcome was a fate worse than death for Meng Yao. In reality, after eternal damnation was struck by the secret skill of the Grand Elder of the Academy and more than half of it was absorbed by Sword Immortal Yu Hua, there was not much power left in the Dermic Dao. Even so, it left an irrecoverable scar on Meng Yao's face. You've ruined me. Why? Why are you so cruel to me? I have no feud with you at all. Meng Yao sat in the mud with disheveled hair and a lost expression. She murmured softly with listless eyes. The blow to her this time round was way too great. In fact, the martial Dao prime body even killed her chance of making a comeback. The beauty and zither Dao that she relied on was crippled by the martial Dao prime body. She lost all her dignity today and her past glory vanished into thin air. In less than half a day, she fell from her high and mighty pedestal into a bottomless abyss where she could not see the light of day. Right then, on the other side, Thunder Monarch heavenly wrath rushed over when he saw that Qiu Siluo was in danger. However, by the time he arrived, the martial Dao prime body had already dealt with Meng Yao. Zimo, let's go. Today's matter has ended. Feng Cantian looked at the group of immortal kings opposite him and felt uneasy as he sent a voice transmission with his spirit consciousness. Although he was fearless, he did not want to die here foolishly. In the future, he was going to kill his way back to the divine firmament immortal domain and take revenge on King Jin and his heir. Brother Feng, take them back first. The tone of the martial Dao prime body was calm, as though he did not notice any danger. "We'll leave together," Feng Cantian insisted. The martial Dao Prime Body said, "Take Heavenly Wolf and Qiu Siluo back to the other side first. Remember, don't attack no matter what happens later on." "You." Feng Cantian could tell that there seemed to be a deeper meaning in the words of the martial Dao Prime Body. He did not ask in detail and merely nodded. He led Heavenly Wolf and Qiu Siluo to leap through the immortal fiend abyss and return to the fiend domain. "Isn't the sect master coming back yet?" Gu Tongyo's eyes were melancholic and worried. Feng Cantian pondered for a moment. The sect master should have other motives. "Let's wait and see. Don't act rashly." Beneath the Builder Tree. The top 200 perfected immortal paragons of the 9 firmament immortal domain and pure land of bliss seized the opportunity to disperse and flee far away. There were only a few people who remained on the spot. Among them were the 3 great fairies, Book Immortal Yunju, Painting Immortal Mo Qing and Chess Immortal Junyu. The martial Dao Prime Body walked slowly towards the Builder Tree. The immortal kings were secretly alarmed and tore through the void one after another, blocking in front of the martial Dao Prime Body. They were on guard and nervous. All the immortal kings witnessed what happened earlier on. A single punch from the martial Dao Prime Body shattered the grotto heavens of 5 immortal kings. How far had Desolate Martial cultivated to? The many immortal kings could clearly tell that Desolate Martial did not have the aura of the grotto heaven realm. However, the power he released was even above the ordinary immortal kings. On the peak of Builder Tree, the 20-odd supreme immortal kings exchanged glances and stood up slowly, emitting a tremendous might that surged over. Immortal Queen Ling Long glanced sideways at Su Zimo of the Divine Firmament Immortal Domain. At that moment, Su Zimo had a calm expression, as though he could not sense any danger. "If you want to leave, this is your last chance." Immortal Queen Ling Long hesitated for a moment and could not help but send a voice transmission with yet another reminder. She could not divine everything about the martial Dao Prime Body nor could she guess his intentions. "Don't worry, Senior." Su Zimo's voice was calm and he did not explain further. The martial Dao Prime Body looked at the 20-odd supreme immortal kings on the peak of Builder Tree and suddenly said, "Why? Are the supreme immortal kings of the 2 domains prepared to attack?" Prince Qin Su of the Grand Firmament Immortal Domain was crippled and Immortal King Long Night was enraged. At that moment, his gaze was dark as he said slowly, "Desolate Martial, how dare you come to the 9 firmament? Meet and start a massacre. If we let you leave alive, where will our dignity go?" "That's right." Immortal King Qing Yang raised his voice and said, "You claim to be the supreme perfected fiend but in reality, you're already an immortal king expert who can defeat those with minor grotto heavens. It won't be considered bullying if we attack you. Desolate Martial, there's no need for you to try and escape from this place." Immortal King Qi Ping sneered, "I don't mind telling you that the void here has already been sealed by us. Even if you summon the Hell Suppression Tripod, you won't be able to escape back to Avicii." Amitba. Heavenly King Luotian of the Pure Land of Bliss clasped his palms together and chanted the Buddhist proclamation softly. "Desolate Martial, the Hell Suppression Tripod in your possession is a sacred item of the Buddhist monasteries. It's time for you to return it to its rightful owner today." The Hell Suppression Tripod was the Emperor weapon of Great Emperor Infinite and was related to Avicii. Even the immortal kings of the 9 firmament immortal domain wanted to take it for themselves, let alone the heavenly kings of the Pure Land of Bliss. Furthermore, when they saw the martial Dao Prime Body release such a terrifying power, the imaginations of the immortal kings ran wild and they thought that it had something to do with Avicii. "All right." The eyes of the martial Dao Prime Body shone with purple flames and his fighting spirit surged as he said slowly, "This is a good opportunity for me to experience the capabilities of the supreme immortal kings of the 2 domains." Chapter 26:16, Chapter 26:16, Everlasting Night. Chapter 26:16, Everlasting Night. When the martial Tao Prime Body said that, the immortals and monks on the peak of the Builder Tree were shocked. How many years had it been since the rise of the Fiend Domain's Desolate Marshal? Desolate Marshal had just been conferred the title of the Supreme Perfected Fiend not long ago. Today, he was actually declaring that he wanted to fight against the Supreme Immortal Kings of the two domains. It was only at that moment that everyone gradually understood that the Supreme Perfected Immortal and Supreme Arhat were not Desolate Marshal's targets. In the eyes of Desolate Marshal, the two ranking lists were indeed a joke. Desolate Marshal was here for the Immortal Kings of the Nine Firmament Immortal Domain and Pure Land of Bliss. Furthermore, it was the Supreme Immortal Kings. Ever since the Nine Firmament meet was held, no one from the Fiend Domain had dared to cause trouble here. Furthermore, the Nine Firmament meet this time round was different from the past. The two domains sent more than 100 ordinary Immortal Kings and more than 20 Supreme Immortal Kings with a massive might. Up till the end of the Perfected Immortal and Arhat rankings, everything went smoothly and peacefully. Who would have thought that Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain would single-handedly cause a blood storm at the Nine Firmament meet today? Let's see what else you have. Immortal King Long Night of the Grand Firmament Immortal Domain attacked and arrived before the Martial Tao Prime Body instantly. He raised his palm and slapped the head of the Martial Tao Prime Body. After entering the Grotto Heaven realm and becoming an Immortal King, many divine powers and secret skills were condensed in the Grotto Heaven. As for the Grotto Heaven, it nourished the body and bloodline throughout the years. Therefore, the body and bloodline of an Immortal King contained the power of the Grotto Heaven and could release a shocking power with every move. For a fight between Grotto Heaven realm experts, it was a little like returning to nature and simplifying things. Although it seemed like it was a simple palm strike from Immortal King Long Night, it contained the power of the Grotto Heaven. It vaguely sealed the void around the Martial Tao Prime Body, preventing him from dodging, and he could only take it head-on. The Martial Tao Prime Body was expressionless as he circulated his blood chi, letting out the deafening sound of raging tides. What strong blood chi! The surrounding Immortal Kings were secretly alarmed when they heard the sound of blood chi rising. How did Desolate Marshal cultivate to such an extent before he even entered the Grotto Heaven realm? Could it be that this person had already condensed a Grotto Heaven and merely hid his aura without revealing it? Bang! The Martial Tao Prime Body punched out and collided with the palm of Immortal King Long Night. Both parties shuddered. Alright. The gaze of Immortal King Long Night intensified as he attacked consecutively. The Martial Tao Prime Body was fearless as he stood in midair and counterattacked. Both parties clashed consecutively in midair and their fists and palms collided with a deafening bang, causing many cracks to appear in the void and the world to tremble. This was a fight between Immortal Kings. Even without the use of the Grotto Heaven, the void would still shake. Both parties clashed for more than 10 rounds and were evenly matched. Immortal King Long Night narrowed his eyes slightly. As a Supreme Immortal King, the Grotto Heaven had nourished his body and bloodline for hundreds of thousands of years. Even after launching consecutive attacks today, he could not gain any advantage against Desolate Marshal at all. Of course, he was only surprised but not nervous. The power released by Desolate Marshal earlier on was not enough to threaten him. Furthermore, he did not use his full strength. For Immortal King experts, the Grotto Heaven was their strongest technique. The other Immortal King experts such as Immortal King Qing Yang exchanged glances with smiles and relaxed expressions. Given the current situation, there was no need for them to attack. Immortal King Long Night alone was enough to suppress Desolate Marshal. Long Night, don't get entangled with him. Suppress him as soon as possible lest other variables appear. Immortal King Qing Yang said in a deep voice. All right. Immortal King Long Night hollered and channeled his essence spirit to prop up his major Grotto Heaven. The void behind him suddenly collapsed and a dark void without any light appeared. That was his long night grotto heaven. In this grotto heaven, one would fall into a long night and it was difficult to see light. With the appearance of the major grotto heaven, the aura of Immortal King Long Night surged and his combat strength rose as well. It's time to end things. Immortal King Long Night said indifferently. He reached into the grotto heaven behind him and withdrew a pitch-black spear. A grotto heaven spirit treasure. After cultivators advanced to the Immortal King realm, their sentient dermic treasures could also be placed into the grotto heaven and nourished by it. As time passed by, when the sentient dermic treasure fused completely with the grotto heaven, they would transform into grotto heaven spirit treasures. Any grotto heaven spirit treasure would contain the dermic Tao of the grotto heaven and was extremely powerful. Swoosh! Immortal King Long Night supported his grotto heaven and strode forward. Waving the pitch-black spear in his hands, he stabbed towards the martial Tao prime body with an apocalyptic might. The martial Tao prime body had a calm expression and a green light flashed on his glabella. The hell suppression tripod appeared and was filled with an ancient aura as electric arcs coiled around it with an extraordinary might. When the Immortal Kings saw the hell suppression tripod, their eyes lit up. This was the weapon of Great Emperor Infinite in the past. More importantly, the hell suppression tripod was the key to controlling the infinite hell. There was no grotto heaven aura on the hell suppression tripod. This confirmed everyone's guess that Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain had not entered the grotto heaven realm at all. Many Immortal Kings glared at the hell suppression tripod with puzzled expressions, as though they had discovered something. The realm of the hell suppression tripod had fallen. After passing through the perfected one heavenly tribulation, it was merely at the level of a sentient dermic treasure. But now, they could see remnant marks left behind by 10 heavenly tribulations on the hell suppression tripod. Could the legend be true? Did Desolate Marshal really attract the 10th heavenly tribulation? When the news spread, even the many Immortal Kings present scoffed and did not believe it, let alone Yuhua and the other perfected immortals. After all, throughout history, there had never been a 10th tribulation since life was born in the upper world. At that moment, when the Immortal Kings saw the 10 burn marks on the hell suppression tripod with their own eyes, they vaguely realized that there was a high chance the rumors of the past were true. There was truly a 10th tribulation in the perfected one heavenly tribulation? Why were there no records of the 10th tribulation throughout history? Even people as talented as the great emperors of the past went through the 9 of 9 heavenly tribulation at the very most. Clang! Just as everyone's imagination was running wild, the pitch-black spear collided heavily against the hell suppression tripod and electric arcs flew everywhere. This time round, the martial Tao prime body retreated a few steps in succession. However, with the hell suppression tripod that had passed through the 10th tribulation, the martial Tao prime body still managed to defend against the accumulated attack of Immortal King Long Night. Although the cultivation realm of the hell suppression tripod had fallen, it was an emperor weapon back then after all. Furthermore, it was the key to suppressing the infinite hell. Even the grotto heaven spirit treasure could not destroy it with ease. Humph! When Immortal King Long Night saw that he could not suppress the martial Tao prime body even after summoning his major grotto heaven and grotto heaven spirit treasure, he had a terrible expression and could not help but harumph coldly before attacking once more. This time round, the blood chi of Immortal King Long Night surged as he wielded his spear and attacked. The major grotto heaven carried endless might and suppressed the martial Tao prime body. He wanted to make use of his Long Night grotto heaven to devour Desolate Marshal and refine him completely as nourishment for his grotto heaven. Chapter 26:17, Chapter 26:17, Unable to Devour. Chapter 26:17, Unable to Devour. The everlasting night and boundless darkness crept forth. Instantly, the world went dark and the heavens lost its light. Immortal King Long Night used his grotto heaven spirit treasure to restrain the hell suppression tripod while the major grotto heaven behind him devoured the figure of the martial Tao prime body. it's all over. When the immortal kings saw that, they shook their heads gently. As long as Desolate Marshal fell into the major grotto heaven of Immortal King Long Night, he would be reduced to fish that could be slaughtered at will, no matter how shocking his methods were. Immortal Queen Ling Long frowned worriedly. On the side of the fiend domain, Feng Cantion took a deep breath and suppressed his urge to attack, continuing to watch. The Martial Dao Prime Body had repeatedly instructed him not to attack. He believed that the Martial Dao Prime Body would not die so easily. In the Long Night Grotto Heaven, the gaze of the Martial Dao Prime Body intensified. Purple flames burned in his eyes and his blood chi surged as he channeled his bloodline to its limits, releasing his bloodline phenomenon, the Heaven and Earth Furnace. Boom! The Martial Dao Prime Body stood in the darkness and shone with an endless brilliance as flames surged into the skies. The flames included the Martial Spirit Fire, Tribulation Fire, Red Lotus Karmic Fire, Dragon Phoenix Flame and Hellfire. Despite the buff of so many flames, he was still unable to go against the Long Night Grotto Heaven. However, it was also impossible for the Long Night Grotto Heaven to devour and refine the Martial Dao Prime Body. For example, Hellfire originated from Avicii. Due to the cultivation realm of the Martial Dao Prime Body, its power was far inferior to when it was in Avicii. However, the Long Night Grotto Heaven could not refine it at all. Initially, the Grotto Heaven was dark and silent. However, after devouring the Martial Dao Prime Body, a gigantic ball of flames appeared in the Grotto Heaven. Both parties were in a stalemate. The blood chi of the Martial Dao Prime Body was strong, and even as time passed by, the flames burned furiously without stopping. However, the power of the Long Night Grotto Heaven was being depleted. When Immortal King Long Night sensed this, his expression darkened. On the battlefield, Heavenly King Luotian chanted a Buddhist proclamation softly and said, "Patron Long Night, you sure are capable. Your merits for killing perfected Fiend Desolate Marshal are immeasurable. However, the Hell Suppression Tripod is a sacred item of the Buddhist monasteries. Patron Long Night, please return it to its rightful owner." Immortal King Qing Yang smiled gently. The Hell Suppression Tripod is an Emperor weapon. It's said to be connected to the infinite hell and a taboo mystic classic. Fellow Taoist Luotian, you're not the only one. I believe everyone present is interested in the Hell Suppression Tripod. Immortal King Qi Ping said indifferently, the Hell Suppression Tripod no longer has an owner. Since we're all present, we can't hand it over to someone casually. The Immortal Kings present thought that Desolate Marshal would definitely die and had already begun to discuss the ownership of the Hell Suppression Tripod. Right then, a violent fluctuation came from the major grotto heaven of Immortal King Long Night. In the endless darkness, a flame appeared and intensified. Immediately after, the ball of flames fell onto the battlefield. In the flames, a figure stood. It was Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain. The Immortal Kings frowned. What was going on? The Long Night Grotto Heaven failed to refine Desolate Marshal and spat him out instead? Sensing the gazes around him, Immortal King Long Night had a terrible expression as he grit his teeth. This fiend is in possession of strange dermic daos and controls many powerful flames. It's difficult to refine him. Amitba. Heavenly King Luotian strode forward. Seems like I'm the only one who can subdue this fiend. When Heavenly King Luotian arrived before the Martial Dao Prime Body, he summoned his major grotto heaven without a second word. A Buddhist light shone from within and auspicious clouds filled the skies, enveloping the Martial Dao Prime Body. Thereafter, Heavenly King Luotian assumed a lotus position and hovered in midair. He held prayer beads in his hands and chanted Buddhist dermic incantations softly. The dermic incantations turned into golden runes that entered the major grotto heaven behind him. Before long, Heavenly King Luotian fiddled with the prayer beads in his hands faster and a layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. A moment later, he suddenly stood up. A figure shrouded in flames flew out from the major grotto heaven that was filled with Buddhist light behind him. It was Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain. It was not just the grotto heavens of the immortal sects, even the grotto heavens of the Buddhist monasteries could not refine the Martial Dao Prime Body. Fu. The Martial Dao Prime Body chuckled and surveyed his surroundings. His gaze swept past the faces of Immortal King Qing Yang and the others and he mocked, "Is that all there is to the supreme immortal kings of the two domains? In my opinion, there's no need for you guys to hold the 9 firmament meet again in the future. It'll just be a joke." Fiend, how brazen! How arrogant! The immortal kings were enraged. Even the 20-odd supreme immortal kings of the two domains revealed sinister killing intent. At the immortal king realm, one was almost at the peak of the upper world and could rule over millions of living beings. They could not withstand any humiliation or provocation. Furthermore, cultivators of both domains were gathered here and everyone was watching. If they could not suppress Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain, the immortal kings of the two domains would probably become jokes of the upper world after today. There were not many immortal kings who could remain calm. Immortal Queen Ling Long could tell that the words of the Martial Dao Prime Body were clearly meant to anger many immortal kings present, including the supreme immortal kings. However, she truly could not figure out the meaning behind the actions of the Martial Dao Prime Body. She could only guess the consequences of the actions of the Martial Dao Prime Body. Initially, for the sake of their dignity, the supreme immortal kings present were embarrassed to join forces against a supreme perfected fiend. Now that they were provoked by the Martial Dao Prime Body, there was a high chance that the 20-odd supreme immortal kings would join forces to suppress the Martial Dao Prime Body in their rage. "Don't waste your breath on him." Immortal King Long Night grit his teeth and said, "This person's Dharmic Dao is strange. Let's release our major grotto heavens and join forces to destroy him." "Exactly." Heavenly King Luotian said in a deep voice, "Since I can't devour and refine this fiend, I can only crush his body and bloodline to purify him forcefully. Come on, let's see how much longer this fiend can last against our combined forces." Immortal King Qing Yang expressed his stance as well. In the blink of an eye, 19 supreme immortal kings stood out and surrounded the Martial Dao Prime Body. The 19 supreme immortal kings released their major grotto heavens in unison. Instantly, the world changed. On the battlefield, 19 major grotto heavens with different Dharmic Daos appeared and crushed towards the Martial Dao Prime Body with a terrifying aura. Immortal Queen Ling Long's heart skipped a beat and she stood up instinctively. Under such circumstances, even if she was in his position, she would not be able to escape. The 19 major grotto heavens had already sealed all exits in all directions. Desolate Marshal might be able to avoid being devoured and refined by a grotto heaven due to some strange Dharmic Dao, but there was no way he could defend against the suppression of 19 major grotto heavens. Immortal Queen Ling Long had just seen it clearly. Although Desolate Marshal was not refined by Immortal King Long Night and Heavenly King Luotian's grotto heavens, he suffered quite a blow and his aura became much weaker. If the 19 major grotto heavens crushed over at the same time, there was only a single outcome for Desolate Marshal: his body and essence spirit would be destroyed. Chapter 26:18, Chapter 26:18, Success. Chapter 26:18, Success. On the peak of the Builder Tree. Although Su Zimo looked calm, he was actually extremely nervous internally. Although the Green Lotus True Body was not involved and would not be implicated, the choice of the Martial Dao Prime Body meant that the Martial Dao Prime Body would cease to exist if he failed. Even so, it was worth the risk for the Martial Dao Prime Body to give it a shot. This choice was extremely important and would determine the future of the Martial Dao Prime Body. It was a path that no one could replicate. Although the Green Lotus True Body was in Heaven and Earth Academy, the inexplicable sense of danger had always existed. As his cultivation realm deepened and his combat strength became stronger, the sense of danger did not disappear. Instead, it intensified. Su Zimo needed the martial Dao prime body to advance further and grow to a sufficiently strong level. On the one hand, the martial Dao prime body could better protect Tianhuang's sect if he was stronger. On the other hand, if the Green Lotus true body encountered any irreconcilable danger in the future, the martial Dao prime body could become a way out for the Green Lotus true body. There was also one more thing. The martial Dao prime body intended to head to the Great Wilderness. If he was only at the true martial realm, he was still lacking in terms of strength. He had to become stronger so that he had the confidence and foundation to look for Daiyu. He had to be qualified to stand shoulder to shoulder with her. Beneath the Builder Tree, the 19 Supreme supported their major grotto heavens and trapped the martial Dao prime body within. They launched their final attacks and crushed and collided continuously. The 19 major grotto heavens contained 19 different dermic Daos and tempered the martial Dao prime body continuously, letting out jarring sounds. The true martial Dao body seemed like it could fall apart at any moment. At that time, the bones and flesh of the martial Dao prime body would be crushed into dust. In less than a few breaths, the martial Dao prime body could not hold on any longer. If it was just one or two major grotto heavens, he could still fight them temporarily with his bloodline phenomenon and the heaven and earth furnace. But now that the 19 major grotto heavens were gathered with dermic Daos surging, even the true martial Dao body could not defend against it. Poof! 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 Blood began to fill the body of the martial Dao prime body, and the true martial Dao body could not withstand the pressure. Under the suppression of the 19 major grotto heavens, his skin split, bones snapped, organs vibrated, and his Dao body was filled with a scarlet blood mist. Cough, cough, cough. The martial Dao prime body coughed out large mouthfuls of blood as well. In reality, the 19 supreme immortal kings had yet to use their full strength. At their cultivation realm, every single one of them had experienced countless life and death situations and had seen too many storms. They were extremely cautious. Although they attacked to suppress Desolate Martial, most of their attention was focused in the direction of the Fiend domain, afraid that anything could happen. Desolate Martial's action looked reckless on the surface. They believed that he must have other trump cards up his sleeves to explain his baffling actions. The group of Supreme Immortal Kings were worried that Emperor Bo Sun would be provoked if they suppressed Desolate Martial. Of the 20-odd Supreme Immortal Kings, a few of them did not participate because they had such considerations as well. However, as time passed by, although the 19 Supreme Immortal Kings had already severely injured Desolate Martial, the direction of the Fiend domain was still calm without any signs of Fiend cultivators, and everyone gradually relaxed. So, that's all to the power of Supreme Immortal Kings? Right then, the weak voice of the martial Dao prime body sounded. Desolate Martial, you're still in the mood to mock us even now. You truly don't know what's good for you. Immortal King. Immortal King Long Night sneered and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, don't worry. Attack with all your might and kill this fiend. Destroy his essence, spirit and soul." That's right. Although Heavenly King Luoshan was from the Buddhist monasteries, he was also murderous at the moment. The Hell Suppression Tripod would only become ownerless once more after Desolate Martial was completely destroyed. That was the only way he could get his hands on it. Kill. The Supreme Immortal Kings hollered and channeled the dermic Daos of the Grotto Heavens with all their might. The power of the Grotto Heavens surged and suppressed the martial Dao prime body. This time round, the martial Dao prime body could no longer hold on. Bang! Boom! Accompanied by a loud bang, the true martial Dao body exploded and his flesh was destroyed. A tremendous power tore through the void and a large area of the void caved in, forming a dark black hole. The terrifying power released by the 19 major grotto heavens not only destroyed the martial Dao prime body's physical body in essence spirit, it even penetrated a large void. The world returned to normal. The cultivators around the builder tree were dumbfounded as well, with shocked expressions. The Fiend Domain's desolate marshal caused such a huge commotion at the 9 firmament meet. He had just suppressed the paragons of the 2 ranking lists, killed the Supreme Arhat and defeated 7 immortal kings. He was fearless and arrogant. And now, he ended up in such a state where he was killed by the combined forces of 19 supreme immortal kings without a corpse left. Not far away, Mo Qing seemed to have lost her soul when she saw that. Her face turned pale and her body swayed slightly, almost falling to the side. Thankfully, Yunzhu reacted in time and supported her hurriedly. Sigh. Yunzhu sighed gently and turned back to look in the direction of Su Zimo at the peak of the builder tree. This was Su Zimo's secret and she could not say it explicitly, nor did she know how to console him. He died just like that? Jun Yu had a conflicted expression and a lost look in her eyes. Her interaction with Desolate Marshal was brief and they only had a short exchange of blows. However, the impression left behind by Desolate Marshal was way too deep. Up till this point her cultivation, Desolate Marshal was the first and only person who gave her the notion that she was helpless to resist. The existence of Desolate Marshal even made her feel despair. No matter how she cultivated, she would not be able to catch up to that person. Jun Yu did not have much prejudice towards the Fiend Domain and Fiend cultivators. She felt a deep sense of pity for Desolate Marshal's death. Mother, Desolate Marshal, died just like that? Lin Luo could not believe it and a look of sadness flashed through her eyes. Back when the siblings were trapped in Langfeng City, it was because of the appearance of Desolate Marshal that the 2 of them managed to escape. No matter where Desolate Marshal came from, he was their savior. Immortal Queen Ling Long sighed and shook her head gently, murmuring, "Should be dead." Even though Immortal Queen Ling Long could peer through the heavenly secrets, she could not figure out how Desolate Marshal could survive against the suppression of 19 major grotto heavens. Instinctively, she looked in the direction of the divine firmament Immortal Domain Su Zimo. At the same time, on the side of the Fiend Domain, Feng Cantian, Yan Beichen, Ming Zhen and Ji Yaoxue looked toward Su Zimo. Everyone who knew Desolate Marshal's true identity wanted an answer. Or rather, they were searching for a sliver of hope. At that moment, Su Zimo was staring fixedly at the dark void beneath the builder tree. His gaze intensified and a smile even appeared on his face. Success. If not for the fact that there were too many cultivators around, Su Zimo would have reared his head and howled. After the martial Dao Prime Body's body and essence spirit were destroyed by the 19 major grotto heavens, Su Zimo indeed lost the connection to the martial Dao Prime Body. However, it was only momentary. In just a few breaths, he sensed the aura of the martial Dao Prime Body once more. He could sense that the aura of the martial Dao Prime Body was initially weak. However, it expanded rapidly and became stronger at an unimaginable speed. An even more terrifying Desolate Marshal was about to reappear. Chapter 26:19, Chapter 26:19, Dao Body and Dao Fruit. Chapter 26:19, Dao Body and Dao Fruit. While the martial Dao Prime Body was in seclusion in Avicii, he did not stop deducing the dermic formulation of the martial Dao. When he was about to come out of seclusion, he had already comprehended the key points and was only missing some details and opportunities. In other words, it was unrealistic for the martial Dao Prime Body to advance to the next realm of the martial Dao within a short period of time. However, at the same time, because he had smelted and browsed through too many ancient books and sutras, another thought flashed through the mind of the martial Dao Prime Body. Perhaps before he entered the next realm of the martial Dao, he could make use of another method to condense his grotto heaven first and become a fiend king. The appearance of the martial Dao Prime Body was a variable that was beyond the 3 realms and 5 elements. The Prime Body's existence originated from the martial Dao fruit. Ordinary Tao fruits condensed the dermic Tao of cultivators and was the essence of their cultivation. There were countless inherent secret skills and insights within. As for the martial Tao fruit, it condensed the essence of the martial Tao. It was not only a noble augmentation, it also contained the will of the martial Tao and the faith of all living beings. It was only through chance and the combination of various powers that a Tao fruit with life force was born. This was unprecedented and could not be replicated. Up till this point of his cultivation, the prime body had fused the martial Tao dermic formulation into his bones and flesh at the true martial realm to temper the true martial Tao body. However, in reality, the true martial Tao body was also a Tao fruit. The Tao body was the Tao fruit and vice versa, the two were one. The martial Tao prime body was the only one throughout history to be in such a situation. It was recorded in the dermic formulation of many inheritances that the prerequisite for condensing a grotto heaven was to shatter the Tao fruit. Through the tremendous power released by the shattering of the Tao fruit, the void outside the body would be smashed, creating a chamber that could connect to the heavens and the three realms, that was the grotto heaven. The process was extremely dangerous. If the power accumulated after the Tao fruit was shattered was insufficient, and one could not support a grotto heaven, it would mean that the breakthrough had failed. They would either die or settle for second best and reach the half-step grotto heaven realm. Although their lifespans would increase, they would never be able to advance to the grotto heaven realm. The idea of the martial Tao prime body was to shatter the true martial Tao body. The true martial Tao body was the fruit of the martial Tao. The shattering of the true martial Tao body meant that the Tao fruit would be shattered. At the same time, there was a chance that a chamber could be opened up and a grotto heaven could be condensed. This grotto heaven would originate from the martial Tao prime body, but the martial Tao prime body was a variable to begin with. In other words, if this grotto heaven was born, there was a high chance that it would exist beyond the three realms and five elements, turning into a variant grotto heaven. That thought was way too terrifying. Even if an ordinary Tao fruit was shattered, the process of breaking through to the grotto heaven realm was extremely dangerous. For a variable like the martial Tao prime body, it was unknown if the true martial Tao body would truly break through to the grotto heaven realm after shattering, just like a Tao fruit. If he failed, the martial Tao prime body would not even have the chance to settle for second best and enter the half-step grotto heaven realm. For ordinary perfected immortals to advance to the grotto heaven realm, they merely had to shatter their Tao fruits. However, what the martial Tao prime body had to shatter was the true martial Tao body that he had condensed with his dermic Tao. If he failed, his essence, spirit and soul would be destroyed. Furthermore, his true martial Tao body had already been cultivated to the perfected stage, and every single move he made could even break through the minor grotto heavens of ordinary immortal kings. Even ordinary grotto heaven spirit treasures could not injure his body. How could such a true martial Tao body be shattered? It was an idea fraught with difficulties and a slim chance of survival. After pondering for a long time, the martial Tao prime body decided to take the risk. Although it was a risk, he was not unprepared. First, he could only rely on external forces to break through the true martial Tao body. Yet, the external force could not be too strong. If an emperor were to release the power of the world and destroy the true martial Tao body, even his dermic Tao would be destroyed and refined. There was no need to talk about condensing a grotto heaven. He would be killed into nothingness before anything could be formed. The safest option was for supreme immortal kings to make use of the power of their major grotto heavens to destroy the true martial Tao body bit by bit. Furthermore, one supreme immortal king was not enough, there had to be at least 10 of them. Second, after the true martial Tao body was shattered, there was actually still a sliver of hope of revival. The bloodline of the true martial Tao body contained the blood of the dragon phoenix. Therefore, the body of the martial Tao prime body contained the final innate divine power of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, the power of the phoenix nirvana. However, it was far from enough if he was merely relying on this innate divine power alone. The Phoenix Nirvana had a 90% chance of failure to begin with. Furthermore, this innate divine power might not be able to unleash its full potential against the suppression of major grotto heavens. Third and most importantly, the trajectory of his deduction had to be correct. The true martial Dao body had to be the Dao fruit such that the destruction of the Dao body could truly shatter the void and condense a grotto heaven. All in all, the 9 firmament meet was the best opportunity for the martial Dao prime body to give this idea a shot. There were enough supreme immortal kings at the 9 firmament meet. Furthermore, the venue of the 9 firmament meet was near the builder tree. Once a huge battle broke out and his true martial Dao body was shattered to evolve into a grotto heaven, this grotto heaven could devour and absorb the life force of the builder tree to extend his life. Beneath the builder tree, Immortal King Qing Yang and the other 18 Supreme Immortal Kings observed the Fiend domain for any activity after they destroyed Desolate Martial's body in essence spirit. They only heaved a sigh of relief when they did not find anything unusual. Immortal King Long Night sneered, "Desolate Martial is so arrogant that I thought he had something up his sleeves. To think that he's just an idiot who doesn't know his place. Foo-foo." Immortal King Qing Yang chuckled. This lad went on a massacre in the Jade Firmament Immortal Domain before escaping back to Avicii. He really thinks that he can do whatever he wants just because he has the Hell Suppression Tripod. He didn't know that once we joined forces to seal the void, his Hell Suppression Tripod would end up as a display piece. At the mention of the Hell Suppression Tripod, the gazes of the Supreme Immortal Kings landed near the pierced void where the Hell Suppression Tripod hovered. Amitba. Heavenly King Luotian chanted his Buddhist proclamation softly and made a move first, arriving before the Hell Suppression Tripod to snatch it away. Monk Luotian, aren't you way too anxious? Immortal King Qing Yang and the others made a move one after another as well. The 19 major grotto heavens were propped up once more and collided in midair. Hold on. Stop first. Suddenly, Heavenly King Luotian frowned and hollered. Why? What are you up to, monk? Immortal King Qi Ping sneered, the void here has already been sealed. No one can dream of leaving until we resolve the matter of the Hell Suppression Tripod. Heavenly King Luotian said hurriedly, there's something strange about this Hell Suppression Tripod. I can't lift it. How is that possible? In a flash, Immortal King Long Night arrived beside the Hell Suppression Tripod and reached out to grab it. The Hell Suppression Tripod did not budge at all, as though it was sucked in by the dark black hole behind it. It was only at that moment that the Immortal Kings noticed something unusual. Why hasn't this void healed after so long? Immortal King Qing Yang narrowed his eyes and asked. Although a fight between Immortal Kings could shatter the void, due to the circulation of heaven and earth laws, the void would recover quickly and recover to its original state. But now, the pitch-black void had yet to recover. The Immortal Kings glared at the dark black hole not far away and their gazes froze. Suddenly, their expressions changed. In the depths of the black hole, a figure appeared faintly, as though it was one with the black hole. You'll have to ask for my permission if you want to snatch my tripod. A shocking voice sounded from the black hole. Chapter 2620, Chapter 2620, Grotto Heaven Transformation, Supreme Suppression. Chapter 2620, Grotto Heaven Transformation, Supreme Suppression. That voice. The Immortal Kings glared at the dark void not far away with bewildered expressions. The immortals and monks around the builder tree were dumbfounded with a look of disbelief on their faces. Desolate Martial. That was the voice of Desolate Martial from the Fiend domain. How was that possible? Hadn't Desolate Martial's body and essence spirit been destroyed by the combined forces of 19 Supreme Immortal Kings? Even the void was penetrated but Desolate Martial was still alive? Mo Qing had a delighted expression and clenched her fists instinctively. She looked at the figure that gradually appeared in the dark void and did not dare to look away. It was as though she was afraid that the figure would disappear once more. Yunju heaved a sigh of relief and looked at Su Zimo, who was on the peak of the builder tree, with a hint of reproach. He seems to have become stronger. Jun Yu looked at the dark void and murmured softly. On the side of the fiend domain. Feng Cantian and the others finally relaxed and smiled. Although Desolate Martial was only the Martial Dao prime body, if he were to die, there might be a huge commotion in Tianhuang's sect as well. On the peak of the builder tree, Immortal Queen Ling Long heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that Desolate Martial was fine. However, she looked at the dark void with a confused expression. Even with her experience and knowledge, she could not see through the dermic formulation used by the Martial Dao prime body to revive. She could only roughly determine that after this change, the Martial Dao prime body had already created a grotto heaven that was unique to him. Beneath the builder tree, the Martial Dao prime body wore a silver mask and walked out slowly from the dark void. He wore purple robes and looked no different from before. However, Immortal King Qing Yang and the others could clearly sense that Desolate Martial had turned even more terrifying. They could sense the aura of a grotto heaven from Desolate Martial. Grotto heaven realm? The Immortal Kings frowned with grim expressions. The dark grotto heaven on Desolate Martial's body fluctuated sinisterly, as though it was one with him and was faintly visible. How could this be? The Immortal Kings were puzzled and did not attack rashly out of caution. The grotto heaven conjured by Desolate Martial seemed to be extremely different from the grotto heaven they knew. Under normal circumstances, the shattering of a cultivator's Dao fruit should happen outside of their bodies. After all, a shattered Dao fruit would release such a tremendous power that it could even penetrate the void. If it was placed in one's body, it would be enough to blow it up to ashes. One would die even before they could condense a grotto heaven. In other words, when cultivators advanced to the Immortal King realm, their grotto heavens were condensed outside their bodies. Although the grotto heavens were outside their bodies, it was closely related to them. They could make use of the grotto heavens to connect to the heavens and absorb heaven and earth essence chi. However, Desolate Martial's grotto heaven seemed to be within his body. A grotto heaven that was within his body? In reality, the grotto heaven of the Martial Dao prime body was not outside or within his body. To be precise, the Martial Dao prime body was the grotto heaven. The new Martial Dao prime body was already one with this grotto heaven. The Martial Dao prime body had reappeared in the world after transforming into a grotto heaven. In terms of the Martial Dao, the prime body was still at the true martial realm and the level of a perfected true Martial Dao body. However, the prime body made use of the uniqueness of the true Martial Dao body and used another method to condense a grotto heaven first to become a fiend king. That was because his Dao body was his Dao fruit. Therefore, this was a path that no one else could replicate. Immortal King Long Night narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "Desolate Martial, you are indeed capable to be able to survive. From the looks of it, you seem to have benefited from this misfortune?" Amitba. Heavenly King Luoshan said slowly, "Since Desolate Martial is still alive, we'll just kill him once more." "That's right." With just a few words, the 19 Supreme Immortal Kings propped up their major grotto heavens once more and charged towards the Martial Dao prime body with an aura of aggressiveness. "You still want to kill me?" The Martial Dao prime body looked at the 19 Supreme Immortal Kings charging over and shook his head gently, saying indifferently, "You guys are way too naive." The moment he said that, the Martial Dao prime body counterattacked as well. Without any unnecessary movements, he punched towards the incoming Heavenly King Luoshan. Not only did that punch contain the dermic formulation of the Martial Dao, it also contained the power of this new grotto heaven. Boom! The fist of the Martial Dao prime body collided with Heavenly King Luoshan's major grotto heaven. In reality, this was also a collision between the grotto heaven of the Martial Dao prime body and Heavenly King Luoshan's major grotto heaven. The world trembled as though it was letting out a tragic cry. Both parties were caught in a stalemate in midair for a moment, and Heavenly King Luotian's expression changed. His major grotto heaven could not hold on any longer, and faint cracks started appearing, threatening to collapse at any moment. How is that possible? Desolate Marshal has only just formed a grotto heaven, so it should merely be a minor grotto heaven. Yet, my major grotto heaven is unable to defend against it? Heavenly King Luotian was shocked and furious. The reason why the Martial Dao Prime Body could release such an attack was not only because of a minor grotto heaven. The reason for his terrifying might was the combination of his perfected true Martial Dao Body and the minor grotto heaven. Alongside his first punch, the Martial Dao Prime Body continued releasing punches in succession. There were a total of 19 for the 19 Immortal Kings present. At the perfected true martial realm, the Martial Dao Prime Body could suppress the minor grotto heaven Immortal Kings. Now that the Martial Dao Prime Body had transformed into a grotto heaven and controlled the power of the grotto heaven realm, his combat strength had increased exponentially, and he could completely suppress the Supreme Immortal Kings present. The moment he transformed into the grotto heaven, the situation of the battle had changed completely. Boom! 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 A series of explosions shook the world. The void beneath the builder tree tore continuously. The grotto heavens of the 19 Supreme Immortal Kings were shaken and shattered by the Martial Dao Prime Body. They could not defend against it at all. How can he be so strong? The 19 Supreme Immortal Kings were shocked. Although the Supreme Immortal Kings surrounded the Martial Dao Prime Body in the middle, in reality, they were already facing a situation where they could collapse at any moment. As long as one of them was afraid and chose to retreat, the other Supreme Immortal Kings might withdraw as well. The 19 Supreme Immortal Kings were still hesitant. Desolate Marshal had just entered the Grotto Heaven realm after all, while they had been famous for a long time. Furthermore, it was a situation of 19 Supreme Immortal Kings against him. It was truly not good for them to retreat just like that. While Immortal King Qing Yang and the others were hesitating, the Martial Dao Prime Body did not give them much time to think. Devour. The Martial Dao Prime Body opened his grotto heaven and hollered softly. His figure seemed to have vanished, and a gigantic and strange grotto heaven appeared in midair. It spun continuously and tore apart the 19 surrounding major grotto heavens. Against the counterattack of the Martial Dao Prime Body, the 19 major grotto heavens were already on the verge of collapse. Now that they were affected by this tremendous suction power, they could not hold on at all and collapse completely. An endless stream of grotto heaven power was devoured by the dark grotto heaven of the Martial Dao Prime Body. Some of the damaged grotto heaven fragments were even devoured by the dark grotto heaven of the Martial Dao Prime Body. Ordinary grotto heavens could reach the heavens and connect to the three realms. They could absorb the essence qi in the world wildly, remove the impurities and refine them, allowing the grotto heavens to gradually grow. However, the grotto heaven of the Martial Dao Prime Body was a variable to begin with and was already beyond the three realms. It was also difficult for this grotto heaven to grow by absorbing heaven and earth essence qi. It could only transform by devouring other grotto heavens to absorb and refine their dermic das. Chapter 26-21, Chapter 26-21, Peerless Ferocity. Chapter 26-21, Peerless Ferocity. Immortal King Qing Yang and the others suddenly realized that the grotto heavens that they had condensed were being devoured by the dark grotto heaven that Desolate Marshal had transformed into. Their major grotto heavens were being torn apart. The Immortal Kings were shocked. Desolate Marshal's grotto heaven could devour their major grotto heavens. Throughout history, there had been countless paragons and monster incarnates. There were also some monster incarnates who cultivated unprecedented and terrifying grotto heavens that possessed devouring powers. However, even those grotto heavens could only devour the divine powers, secret skills, grotto heaven powers, divine weapons or dermic treasures of others. There had never been any immortal king who could devour the grotto heavens of other immortal kings whole like desolate Marshall. All of their grotto heavens contained the profoundness of their cultivations. It could be said that every immortal king was practically the god within their grotto heavens. Devouring the grotto heaven of the other party meant that he wanted to devour the dermic Tao contained in the grotto heaven. However, the dermic Tao in every grotto heaven was different. If one devoured another person's dermic Tao into their grotto heaven forcefully, it would mean that an intense dermic Tao conflict would break out within his grotto heaven. This was equivalent to shifting the battlefield into his grotto heaven. If he could not suppress it, his grotto heaven would explode and his cultivation would vanish into thin air before the other party even attacked. In the top auction houses and trading houses of the upper world, there would indeed be some priceless treasures such as the grotto heaven fragments of fallen immortal kings. Those grotto heaven fragments contained the dermic Taos of the fallen immortal kings. For some grotto heaven realm experts, they could make use of a long period of time to gradually digest and smelt such grotto heaven fragments to comprehend the dermic Taos without much conflict. However, the way Desolate Marshall was forcefully devouring their grotto heavens was an unprecedented and frenzied act. Furthermore, Desolate Marshall was not only devouring a single major grotto heaven of one supreme immortal king, he wanted to devour 19 major grotto heavens of 19 supreme immortal kings in one go. Aren't you afraid of biting off more than you can chew? Immortal King Long Night shouted with a furious expression. They were still alive and in their peak condition. The grotto heavens did not only contain their dermic Taos, but also their powerful wills. Desolate Marshall was way too domineering and unreasonable. Not only did he want to devour their dermic Taos, he wanted to subdue their wills as well. Heavenly King Luotian channeled his essence spirit and the major grotto heaven behind him shone with a Buddhist light that was filled with a blinding golden radiance. Since this fiend wants to die, let's fulfill his wish. The 19 supreme immortal kings channeled their blood chi and forced themselves to hold on to their major grotto heavens while continuing to exert pressure on the Martial Tao prime body. The figure of the Martial Tao prime body was faintly visible in his dark grotto heaven. He did not repel any of the 19 major grotto heavens and devoured them with all his might. If it was an ordinary grotto heaven, it would indeed not be able to devour the grotto heaven of other immortal kings directly. However, the grotto heaven of the Martial Tao prime body was a variable and was not within the three realms or restricted by the laws of this world. The grotto heaven of the Martial Tao prime body could not refine 19 major grotto heavens in a short period of time. However, his grotto heaven was like a bottomless abyss that could absorb everything. He would first absorb the dermic Taos of the 19 major grotto heavens forcefully before refining them slowly in the future. Both parties were only in a stalemate for a moment. The expressions of Immortal King Qing Yang and the others turned terrible. When Desolate Marshall devoured their different dermic Taos, his dark grotto heaven did not explode. Instead, it became even more terrifying. The radius of the grotto heaven became larger and its devouring power was even stronger. Immortal King Qing Yang and the others could clearly sense the dermic Taos contained in their grotto heavens weakening alongside their strength. If this continued, their hundreds of thousands of years of cultivation might be devoured by Desolate Marshall. In fact, their major grotto heavens might even drop in cultivation realm and be relegated to become minor grotto heavens. This was a loss that they could not endure. Retreat. That thought flashed through the mind of Immortal King Qing Yang. He could not let this drag on any longer. Otherwise, their major grotto heavens would be devoured cleanly before Desolate Marshall's grotto heaven even exploded. He had to leave as soon as possible while he still had the strength to break free. Desolate Marshall's dermic Tao was way too evil. The only people who could suppress him were probably peak immortal kings with perfected grotto heavens. At that thought, Immortal King Qing Yang retreated and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, hold on first. I'll send a message to Divine Firmament Palace. The moment the Immortal King Qin Yang retreated, the other Supreme Immortal Kings retreated before he could finish. The combined forces of the 19 Supreme Immortal Kings dissipated instantly. The figure of the martial Tao Prime Body reappeared and many mysterious and terrifying dermic Daos spewed from his body, transforming into countless blinding runes that circled around him as his aura surged. His gaze was burning as he locked onto the aura of Immortal King Long Night. Instantly, he closed in and punched forward, tearing through the air. The major grotto heaven of Immortal King Long Night was torn into pieces by the martial Tao Prime Body and its aura was weak. Right now, it could not defend against this forceful punch of the martial Tao Prime Body at all. Bang! Boom! That punch was earth-shaking. The major grotto heaven of Immortal King Long Night collapsed completely. The fist of the martial Tao Prime Body charged right in and broke through the major grotto heaven of Immortal King Long Night. The fist still had strength left and struck the chest of Immortal King Long Night. The overwhelming and terrifying power shattered the body of Immortal King Long Night instantly. Blood filled the air. The immortals and monks on the peak of the Builder Tree were shocked and horrified. Immortal King Long Night was not an ordinary Immortal King, but a Supreme Immortal King with a major grotto heaven. But now, his body was shattered by a single punch from Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain. The other 18 Supreme Immortal Kings had wary expressions and did not dare to advance. If that was the case for the Supreme Immortal Kings, the remaining 100-odd ordinary Immortal Kings were even more afraid of attacking. The Fiend Domain's Desolate Marshal had just condensed his grotto heaven, but he was already so domineering and ferocious. He suppressed the Immortal Kings of the two domains until they could not raise their heads and dodged him. The reason why the martial Tao Prime Body targeted Immortal King Long Night was not because they had any deep feud. It was because the Grand Pure Jade Manual was now in the hands of Immortal King Long Night. As a Supreme Immortal King, Immortal King Long Night had expected that his body and bloodline would not be able to withstand the punch of the martial Tao Prime Body. The moment the fist of the martial Tao Prime Body descended, his essence spirit attached itself to the Grand Pure Jade Manual and fled into the distance with a ball of essence blood. Indeed, his body was shattered by a single punch from the martial Tao Prime Body. The tremendous power charged towards his essence spirit and essence blood. However, it was dissipated by the power of the seal on the Grand Pure Jade Manual. Immortal King Long Night made use of the essence blood to condense his body rapidly and tear through the void, prepared to escape back to the Grand Firmament Immortal Domain. The martial Tao Prime Body chased relentlessly like a shadow. The moment Immortal King Long Night tore through the void, the martial Tao Prime Body had already caught up to him. Right then, a change happened. Chapter 26-22, 26-22 Awakening of the Builder Tree. 26-22 Awakening of the Builder Tree. In the deep void torn apart by Immortal King Long Night, an evil power suddenly burst forth. A ghastly green light flashed and disappeared, entering the glabella of Immortal King Long Night. The attention of Immortal King Long Night was entirely focused on the martial Tao Prime Body chasing after him. He had not expected that a fatal killing intent would be hidden in the void before him. At the same time, he had not expected that apart from Desolate Marshal, there was someone else who would dare to kill him at the Nine Firmament meet. Immortal King Long Night was in a state of panic to begin with after being hunted by the martial Tao Prime Body. Coupled with the fact that he was caught off guard, he was killed by the ghastly green light that suddenly flashed through the depths of the void. A Supreme Immortal King died on the spot. The Immortal Kings were shocked. Up till this point of the Nine Firmament meet, although the cultivators on the perfected Immortal and Arhat rankings suffered immense losses and even the Supreme Arhat was killed by Desolate Marshal, no Immortal King expert died. The death of an Immortal King was extremely important. Furthermore, a Supreme Immortal King had died. In fact, an Emperor might be activated with the death of a Supreme Immortal King. Mm. The martial Tao prime body frowned slightly and suddenly stopped in his tracks. He felt an extremely dangerous aura from the existence hidden in the deep void. There was a high chance that this expert had already surpassed the Grotto Heaven realm and was at the Emperor realm. That was also the reason why he could kill Immortal King Long Night cleanly before disappearing rapidly. Who was this person? How long had he been here? Was it an enemy of Immortal King Long Night? Was he here for the Grand Pure Jade Manual, or were there some other reasons? What puzzled the martial Tao prime body the most was that the ghastly green aura seemed familiar and made him feel extremely disgusted. Could it be the witch race? At the level of an immortal king, it was already difficult for them to die. The fact that the intruder could kill Immortal King Long Night so cleanly was proof of how terrifying his methods were. The martial Tao prime body did not continue chasing, he had completely lost track of the mysterious expert's aura. This person laid in ambush here and vanished after killing Immortal King Long Night, as though he had never appeared. His spirit perception warned him repeatedly. He could not linger here. Even without the reminder of his spirit perception, the martial Tao prime body was prepared to retreat. Not far behind him, a powerful life form was awakening. The Builder Tree. Perhaps due to the commotion of the 9 firmament meet or for some other reason, the Builder Tree had already awakened in advance. Given the power of the Builder Tree, apart from emperors, all the Immortal King experts present had to avoid it. Furthermore, there was a high chance that the death of Immortal King Long Night would alarm the Immortal Emperor of the Grand Firmament Immortal Domain. Even with the current capabilities of the martial Tao prime body, he could not take on an Emperor expert head-on. He had already achieved his goal of using the Supreme Immortal Kings to shatter his true martial Tao body. There was no need for him to linger here. Hurry and leave. Return to Tianhuang's sect immediately. Before the martial Tao prime body left, he sent a voice transmission to Feng Cantion using his spirit consciousness. Feng Cantion had been paying attention to the commotion the entire time and had already sensed the violent aura released by the Builder Tree. Once this ancient divine tree was awakened, it did not matter if one was from the 9 firmament immortal domain, pure land of bliss or fiend domain. Within its territory, any living being that barged in would be viewed by it as an anomaly, a provocation and threat. When Feng Cantion heard the voice transmission from the martial Tao prime body, he was extremely decisive and tore through the void, bringing Yan Beichen, Mingzhen and the others into the spatial tunnel and disappearing. On the other side, the Builder Tree was completely awakened and released a violent life force. As though they could sense the living beings around them, thick branches danced like green anacondas. They were filled with a resplendent glow and fell into a frenzied rage. Piak! 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 A few branches swept past and whipped the crowd of more than 100 Immortal King experts. Instantly, more than 10 Immortal Kings were sent flying and their bodies exploded. An Immortal King released his Grotto Heaven, but it was shattered by a tree branch and collapsed instantly. Ordinary Immortal Kings were helpless against the Builder Tree. If that was the case for Immortal Kings, all the perfected immortals and arhats present would have to die once all the branches of the Builder Tree started flailing. Retreat! Immortal King Qing Yang let out a long howl. Even with his capabilities, he could not care about too many people. He could only bring the 3 great fairies and the other perfected immortal paragons of the divine firmament immortal domain who were closest to him to break through the void, prepared to escape back to the divine firmament immortal domain. As for the thousands of perfected immortals of the divine firmament immortal domain on the peak of the Builder Tree, he could not care less about them. Immortal Queen Ling Long was on the peak of the Builder Tree the entire time and did not descend. At that moment, she brought Lin Lei and Lin Luo with her and shifted her gaze toward Su Zimo. She sent a voice transmission with her spirit consciousness, "Don't worry, I'll take you out of here first." All the Immortal Kings could not care less and could only bring along the perfected immortals and arhats around them. They shattered the void one after another, prepared to escape from this place. However, Right then, a gigantic green halo burst forth from the body of the builder tree and spread rapidly, enveloping the surrounding 50 kilometers. The voids that were broken by the immortal kings were repaired instantly under the envelopment of the green halo, and the spatial tunnels vanished as well. The voids healed and the spatial tunnels were gone, leaving the cultivators of the two domains stranded. Pust! The immortal kings gasped and were secretly alarmed. What was this builder tree trying to do? Was this divine tree trying to keep them all here and start a massacre? Initially, the martial Dao prime body could have left right away. However, he suddenly paused when he saw the green halo emitted by the builder tree. Unlike the panic and fear of others, the martial Dao prime body looked at the green halo and seemed to have thought of something. Purple flames danced in his eyes as he pondered. Piak! A tree branch was flung down and tore through the void wildly, smashing onto the builder tree mountain range, causing the entire mountain range to collapse. Dozens of perfected immortals and arhats on the mountain range who could not dodge in time were whipped to death by the builder tree's branch. Their essence, spirits and souls were destroyed. As for the thousands of thick branches on the builder tree, they were already raised and could descend at any moment. At that time, even the entire builder tree mountain range might be destroyed, let alone the many perfected immortals and arhats present. Most likely, only the immortal king experts could escape from the attack range of the builder tree with the help of their movement techniques. Everyone else was going to die here. The paragons and monster incarnates of the two domains were gathered at the 9 firmament meet this time round. If the perfected immortals and arhats of the two domains were to die here, it would cause irreparable losses for the 9 firmament immortal domain and pure land of bliss. The current situation had already spiraled out of hand and was beyond the control of the immortal kings. Now that the builder tree had awakened in advance, all the immortal kings only wanted to protect themselves and escape from this place. None of them could care about the martial Dao prime body anymore. Right then, an unstoppable might came from the direction of the 9 firmament immortal domain and enveloped the builder tree. On the other side, in the direction of the pure land of bliss, a resplendent and divine golden light passed through the layers of clouds and tore through the firmaments, scattering down and dissipating the green halo around the builder tree. Chapter 26-23, 2623 Appearance of Emperors. 2623 Appearance of Emperors. In the direction of the 9 firmament immortal domain, a figure with a terrifying aura appeared slowly. It seemed to be looking down on the world and was unparalleled, emitting an endless might. Against such a majestic might, even the immortal kings and heavenly kings present could not defend against it, let alone the perfected immortals and arhats. An immortal emperor had appeared. Su Zimo focused his gaze. The facial features of this immortal emperor were similar to Prince Qin Su. If he was not wrong, this should be Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament. Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament stood in midair and his tremendous might faced the builder tree from afar, blocking the thousands of branches temporarily, as though he was communicating with something. However, the builder tree had already fallen into a berserk state and did not give Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament any face at all, releasing an even more terrifying might. The thousands of branches of the builder tree broke free from the control of Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament instantly and enveloped in the direction of the builder tree mountain range. The builder tree's thousands of thick branches were lush and covered the skies. A large shadow enveloped down in a suffocating manner. Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament's expression was terrible. Even with his combat strength, he could not fight against the enraged builder tree. In a flash, Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament made a decision. Waving his robes, he protected the cultivators of the Grand Firmament Immortal Domain and retreated into the distance. Given his strength, if he chose to protect all the cultivators from the 9 Firmament Immortal Domain and pure land of bliss at the peak of the builder tree, he would definitely be severely injured by the builder tree as well. As an immortal emperor in charge of an entire immortal domain, there was no way he would take that risk. It was already extremely benevolent of him to protect the immortals of the Grand Firmament Immortal Domain. When the other cultivators of the two domains saw that, they quickly realized the intentions of Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament. All of them had been heartlessly abandoned. The immortals and monks were indignant. However, although they harbored resentment, they did not dare to offend Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament in any way. Furthermore, they would not get the chance either. The attack of the Builder Tree had already descended and cultivators of the two domains on the peak of the Builder Tree were about to die on the spot. Right then, the blinding golden light in the direction of the pure land of bliss shifted rapidly and shone on the immortals and monks on the peak of the Builder Tree through the gaps in the leaves. Everyone seemed to be covered in a layer of sacred gold foil that shone brightly. Bang! Boom! Thousands of branches smashed down with a series of deafening bangs. The Builder Tree mountain range beneath everyone had already collapsed completely. However, the immortals and monks were shrouded by a layer of divine golden light that blocked most of the damage released by the Builder Tree. Unknowingly, a middle-aged monk was shielding everyone from the Builder Tree alone, protecting all of them. An emperor of the Buddhist monasteries had descended. Compared to the Builder Tree, the middle-aged monk seemed incomparably tiny. His body was not even as thick as a branch of the Builder Tree. However, at that moment, to everyone, the back view of the middle-aged monk seemed extremely tall and mighty. It was especially so when they compared him to Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament. The difference was obvious. Patrons, hurry and retreat. I won't be able to hold on for much longer. The middle-aged monk's body swayed slightly and his voice turned hoarse, as though he had suffered quite a blow. The immortals and monks seemed to have woken up from a dream as they hurriedly circulated their movement techniques and fled into the distance. The golden light of the middle-aged monk destroyed the green halo released by the Builder Tree previously. This meant that the Immortal King experts could tear through the void and leave this place at any moment. When the martial Dao Prime Body saw the two emperors appear, he did not dare to hesitate and tore through the void hurriedly, entering a spatial tunnel. Thereafter, he summoned the Hell Suppression Tripod rapidly and guarded it behind him before glancing in the direction of the middle-aged monk. As an emperor expert, there was naturally a chance that the middle-aged monk might attack him. The reason why he summoned the Hell Suppression Tripod was to prevent any accidents. For some unknown reason, perhaps because the middle-aged monk was too busy facing the Builder Tree or because he was injured and was unwilling to bother about the martial Dao Prime Body. In any case, from the moment the martial Dao Prime Body tore through the void to the moment he left this place, the middle-aged monk did not attack him. However, the moment the martial Dao Prime Body turned back and looked at the middle-aged monk, he realized that the latter was looking at him as well. Their eyes met. For some unknown reason, the martial Dao Prime Body suddenly felt an indescribable sense of familiarity. The middle-aged monk had handsome features and a benevolent expression that left a favorable impression. However, the martial Dao Prime Body was certain that he had never seen this person before. How could that be? Where did that sense of familiarity come from? The martial Dao Prime Body was not the only one. The Green Lotus True Body was also reminiscing. Su Zimo believed that the sense of familiarity that flashed through the martial Dao Prime Body's mind earlier on was definitely not without reason. The cultivators of the Nine Firmament Immortal Domain and Pure Land of Bliss made use of the time bought by the middle-aged monk to finally escape from the attack range of the Builder Tree. The cultivators had pale expressions as they looked in the direction of the Builder Tree with lingering fear. If not for the appearance of the emperor of the Buddhist monasteries, everyone present would have been buried at the peak of the Builder Tree beneath the rubble. As expected of someone from the Buddhist monasteries. He's compassionate and sacrificed himself to save others. He's truly on a different level from us, impressive. That's right. This accomplished monk saved all of us. We shall definitely remember this life-saving grace and repay him till our deaths. I wonder who this emperor of the Buddhist monasteries is. What's his dharmic title? After escaping, many cultivators looked at the middle-aged monk in the distance and could not help but discuss softly. Zen Master Huiwen pondered for a moment and said thoughtfully, "This senior looks like Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma." After the middle-aged monk appeared, his back was facing the immortals and monks and no one could see him clearly. Before long, the middle-aged monk escaped unscathed from the builder tree and arrived here. Everyone could clearly see that the kasaya on the middle-aged monk's chest was stained with blood. It was clear that he was injured after fighting against the builder tree. It's truly Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma. Zen Master Huiwen's heart skipped a beat when he saw the middle-aged monk. Delighted, he hurried forward and clasped his palms together, bowing. "Greetings, Senior 6 Brahma." He was not the only one. A few other heavenly kings of the Buddhist monasteries recognized the middle-aged monk and hurried forward to greet him as well. They were surprised and delighted with deep respect in their eyes. When the other monks saw that, they no longer had any doubts and knelt down hurriedly with elated expressions, chanting the name of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma. Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma. Suddenly, Su Zimo recalled a piece of information that Lu Ping had told him back in Heaven and Earth Academy. It was said that after Emperor Bo Sun appeared and killed a few heavenly kings in succession, he disappeared and only Heavenly King 6 Brahma survived. Heavenly King 6 Brahma was enlightened after the calamity. He advanced courageously in Buddhism and became an emperor, now known as Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma. This accomplished monk even opened a forum in the Buddhist monasteries to preach sutras and spread Dharmic Tao widely. He attracted countless Buddhist monks and had a huge impact in recent years. Su Zimo frowned and fell into deep thought. It was a nagging feeling, as though he had neglected something. Chapter 26-24, 26-24 Bo Sun's Ambition. 26-24 Bo Sun's Ambition. At that moment, Su Zimo was not standing with the cultivators of the divine firmament immortal domain. Instead, he was standing beside immortal Queen Ling Long. Immortal Queen Ling Long did not notice Su Zimo's abnormality. Instead, she looked in the direction of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma and lamented, as expected of an accomplished monk from the Buddhist monasteries of the Pure Land of Bliss. It's admirable that he can be so magnanimous. That's right. At the side, Lin Luo whispered as well, compared to this accomplished monk, Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament is far inferior. It's not merely in terms of their levels as human beings. The cultivation realm of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma seems to be above Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament as well. Immortal Queen Ling Long pondered for a moment. Yes. I heard that this senior has just entered the Emperor realm not long ago. The fact that he's able to cultivate to this point is admirable indeed. Su Zimo was in deep thought and tried his best to recall. When he heard the words of Immortal Queen Ling Long, a thought flashed through his mind. Pust. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he gasped. He finally recalled why the martial Tao Prime Body felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity when he saw Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma. It was because the martial Tao Prime Body had experienced that familiarity from Emperor Bo Sun before. Initially, Su Zimo had not connected Emperor Bo Sun to Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma of the Pure Land of Bliss. However, at that moment, when he recalled the information Lu Ping told him and what Immortal Queen Ling Long had just said, everything seemed to make sense. Back when Emperor Bo Sun appeared, the heavenly kings of the Buddhist monasteries that surrounded him died, including the true Heavenly King 6 Brahma. The reason why Heavenly King 6 Brahma did not die was because the Heavenly King 6 Brahma that appeared later on was transformed by Emperor Bo Sun. Others might not have the ability, but Emperor Bo Sun cultivated both the Buddhism and Fiend Daos. Many years ago, he had already achieved extremely deep attainments in Buddhism. Now that he had broken free from Avicii, his comprehension of Buddhism had probably reached an unimaginable realm. If Emperor Bo Sun were to transform into a Buddha, apart from a great emperor, there was probably no one else who could see through him. That could also explain why Emperor Bo-sun seemed to have vanished from the world after he appeared and there was no news of him in the Fiend Domain. That was because Emperor Bo-sun was not in the Fiend Domain at all. He had long transformed into Heavenly King 6 Brahma of the Buddhist monasteries and cultivated openly in the Pure Land of Bliss. Gaining enlightenment after his life and death experience was naturally just a facade. Emperor Bo-sun was an expert among emperors to begin with. All he had to do was suppress and conceal his original cultivation realm before revealing it slowly. In the eyes of others, it was because he gained a blessing in disguise to become an emperor. Emperor Bo-sun's true combat strength was definitely far above Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament, so he could naturally defend against the attacks of the Builder Tree. In fact, Su Zimo suspected that the struggle demonstrated by Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma earlier on as well as the bloodstains on his chest were merely intentional acts of Emperor Bo-sun. That was the only way he could subdue the hearts of others. In reality, the effect of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma's performance earlier on was indeed not bad. It was not just the monks of the Pure Land of Bliss, the cultivators on the side of the 9 Firmament Immortal Domain were in awe of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma as well. Even Immortal Queen Ling Long praised Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma endlessly. Su Zimo had a grim expression. If his deduction was not wrong and Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma was Emperor Bo-sun, the fact that Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma was opening a forum in the Buddhist monasteries to preach sutras and spread Dharmic Tao was enough to send shivers down one's spine. Back then, Emperor Bo-sun had already unified the Fiend Domain. He was surrounded and killed by Emperor experts of the 2 domains when he tried to conquer the Pure Land of Bliss. Now that he had reappeared, he hid his identity and transformed into a Buddha. There was a high chance that he was after the entire Pure Land of Bliss. If the influence of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma in the Pure Land of Bliss grew and eventually reached its peak, he would have countless believers and monks under his lead. Bo-sun's ambitions were frightening. In that case, there was a high chance that the Pure Land of Bliss would turn into a second Fiend Domain. Once cultivators fell into blind faith and worship, they would no longer possess rationality. The difference of whether they were Buddhas or fiends would lie on a single thought. At that time, there was a high chance that the Pure Land of Bliss would fall into an endless massacre and blood would flow like rivers. Su Zimo did not dare to continue thinking. "Zimo, what's wrong?" Right then, Immortal Queen Ling Long seemed to have noticed something amiss with Su Zimo and turned around, asking softly. "Senior, you have to be careful." Just as Su Zimo was about to reveal the identity of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma to Immortal Queen Ling Long, he felt a searing gaze. Instinctively, Su Zimo looked over and met with the eyes of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma. Those eyes were filled with benevolence and wisdom. However, at that moment, there was a strange look in his eyes when he looked at Su Zimo. Pust. Su Zimo shuddered and suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. His hairs stood on end and his scalp prickled. That gaze. Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma seemed to have already sensed something, and that gaze was a warning for him to watch his words. Given Emperor Bo-sun's capabilities, nobody could save Su Zimo if Emperor Bo-sun wanted to kill him right now. "Are you alright?" Noticing the change in Su Zimo's expression, Immortal Queen Ling Long frowned slightly. She followed Su Zimo's gaze and looked at Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma, who was not far away. At that moment, Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma had already shifted his gaze elsewhere, as though he had not looked at Su Zimo the entire time. Su Zimo's body stiffened and he lowered his head slowly. Upon hearing Immortal Queen Ling Long's question, Su Zimo was silent for a moment before shaking his head. "It's nothing much." Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma's gaze earlier on had 2 layers of meaning to it. First, it was to threaten him. Second, it was to remind him not to watch his words. Su Zimo was worried that if he revealed the true identity of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma to Immortal Queen Ling Long, he would bring upon death for her and the human monarch. Although Su Zimo did not say anything, his abnormality earlier on still attracted the attention of Immortal Queen Ling Long. Her gaze inadvertently lingered on Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma. Actually, from the beginning, she had already felt that something was amiss. Why would the cultivation realm of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma rise so quickly? However, those were merely passing thoughts in her mind. She did not think too much about them. Coupled with Su Zimo's reaction earlier on, although Immortal Queen Ling Long did not notice anything unusual about Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma, she made it a point to be cautious. At that moment, Su Zimo lowered his head slightly with a dark gaze and remained silent. There was something that he could not understand. Logically speaking, Emperor Bo Sun had only met the martial Tao Prime body once. Today was the first time the Green Lotus True Body was meeting Emperor Bo Sun in his Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma form as well. How did Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma know that he was the martial Tao Prime body? That was the only possibility why Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma noticed him right away and warned him with that gaze. Emperor Bo Sun once pushed the martial Tao Prime body into Greater Avicii. Why did he not attack the martial Tao Prime body earlier on and allowed the latter to leave? Chapter 26-25, 26-25 Think at Length. 26-25 Think at Length. Su Zimo had no intention of revealing the true identity of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma for the time being. On the one hand, it was the warning from Emperor Bo Sun. More importantly, it was not only in the Pure Land of Bliss. After this incident, Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma had also gained an extremely positive reputation in the hearts of the 9 Firmament Immortal Domain Immortals. If Su Zimo were to stand out and tell the truth that Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma was Emperor Bo Sun, there would only be a single outcome for him. He would be treated as a lunatic with ulterior motives. In fact, countless people would suspect his motives and suspect that he was a spy from the Fiend Domain who was here to slander Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma and sow discord between the two domains. Even without Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma making a move personally, countless fanatic believers would stand out and tear him into pieces. Who would suspect a benevolent emperor of the Buddhist monasteries who sacrificed himself for others over the words of a grade 9 heaven immortal like him? Looking at the benevolent Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma who was surrounded by many immortals and monks, Su Zimo felt a chill in his heart. The situation in the heavenly world was getting more chaotic and no one knew what would happen in the future. Of course, what made Su Zimo feel relieved was that Emperor Bo Sun was not without opponents. In this generation, Emperor Bo Sun was not the only one who had appeared. A fiend emperor that was even older than him had reappeared and was now presiding over the fiend domain. Even if Emperor Bo Sun could wreak havoc in the Pure Land of Bliss, he could only occupy that domain at most. If he wanted to regain control of the fiend domain, he would definitely have to go against Fiend Emperor Apocalypse. At that time, there would definitely be a battle between the two fiend emperors. It would naturally be for the best if it was an internecine outcome. Even if one party was defeated, the other party would probably suffer immense losses. This might be an excellent opportunity for the 9 Firmament Immortal Domain. At that time, the 9 Firmament Immortal Domain could even accumulate strength to suppress the remaining Fiend Emperor and calm the chaos. Who was that earlier on? Right then, a furious shout sounded and a tremendous might enveloped the immortals and monks of the two domains, causing their hearts to tremble. This was the wrath of an emperor. Su Zimo looked in the direction of the voice and saw Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament surveying his surroundings. His gaze swept past Immortal King Qin Yang and the others as he asked coldly, "Long Night died and so did Qin Su, but you guys saw no one? Are all of you blind?" Immortal King Qin Yang and the others lowered their heads and did not dare to utter a thing. Although all of them were revered as immortal kings and many of them were supreme immortal kings, they had to bow down obediently in front of an immortal emperor. They did not even dare to refute the immortal emperor's scolding. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Prince Qin Su was dead as well. Although Qin Su was severely injured by the martial Tao prime body and his body was destroyed, there was still an essence spirit carried and protected by Immortal King Long Night. To think that the mysterious expert hidden in the deep void had not only killed Immortal King Long Night, but also the Emperor's son, Qin Su. Initially, Su Zimo thought that Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament was alarmed due to the death of a supreme immortal king. From the looks of it, Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament probably only chose to come out of seclusion because he loved his son so much. Of course, there was another reason. That mysterious expert should have taken away the Grand Pure Jade Manual while killing Immortal King Long Night and Prince Qin Su. Which of you has the Grand Pure Jade Manual? Right then, Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament glared at Immortal King Qin Yang and the others and asked coldly with a sinister tone. Immortal King Qin Yang and the others were alarmed and shook their heads hurriedly. This was no small matter and they did not dare to be perfunctory. Immortal King Qin Yang said in a deep voice, Immortal Emperor, Qin Su was first severely injured by Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain and his body was destroyed. Only his essence spirit managed to escape with the Grand Pure Jade Manual. Fellow Taoist Long Night carried Qin Su's essence spirit and the Grand Pure Jade Manual with him in order to protect the latter. Now that fellow Taoist Long Night and Qin Su are dead, the Grand Pure Jade Manual should have been snatched away by that mysterious person. Immortal King Qi Ping hesitated for a moment. Immortal Emperor, I noticed that the methods released by that mysterious person were a little similar to. He wanted to continue but paused. Speak. Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament hollered. They resemble the methods of the witch race. Immortal King Qi Ping said. Immortal King Qin Yang nodded slightly as well. At that time, a ghastly green light indeed flashed in the depths of the void and entered the glabella of fellow Taoist Long Night, killing him. The witch race. Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament frowned slightly with a dark expression. If this matter involved experts outside the heavenly world, it would be difficult to deal with. Could he possibly rush over to the witch world to demand for the culprit with just a few words from Immortal King Qin Yang and the others? Even if it was truly done by an expert of the witch race, there was no way the culprit would confess to it foolishly. The greatest possibility was that this matter would be left unresolved. At that thought, Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament felt frustrated. He merely felt pity for the death of Immortal King Long Night. However, Qin Su's premature death and the loss of the Grand Pure Jade Manual enraged him. Immortal King Qin Yang and the others could tell the likely outcome of this matter as well. As such, they could naturally guess the frustration and resentment in the heart of Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament right now. Zen Master Huiwen could not help but say, in my opinion, the culpability of this matter lies on Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain. The Supreme Arhat of the Pure Land of Bliss, Shi Wunyan, was killed by the Martial Tao Prime Body. Naturally, the monks of the Buddhist monasteries hated the Martial Tao Prime Body to the core. Since nothing could be done to the witch world, they might as well redirect the anger of Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament onto Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain. Zen Master Huiwen said, if Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain hadn't come over to wreak havoc in the Nine Firmament Immortal Domain and severely injured young friend Qin Su before chasing after fellow Taoist Long Night, the two of them wouldn't have been ambushed and died. Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain. Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament narrowed his eyes slightly and murmured. A moment later, he said, Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain has the Hell Suppression Tripod and is already hiding in Avicii. Even with my capabilities, I can't do anything to him. Zen Master Huiwen said hurriedly, although Desolate Marshal is hiding, his Tianhuang sect is still in the Fiend Domain. Why don't? Zen Master Huiwen's meaning was clear, he wanted to get Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament to destroy Tianhuang's sect of the Fiend Domain. However, he was interrupted by a Buddhist proclamation before he could finish. Amitba. Heavenly Lord Six Brahma shook his head gently and looked at Zen Master Huiwen with a burning gaze. He said slowly, Hui-1, your killing intent is too strong. If you don't wake up in time, you might be in danger of turning into a fiend. Zen Master Hui-1 shuddered. The gaze of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma looked wise, as though it could read his thoughts and intentions. All his thoughts seemed to be exposed under the gaze of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma. Zen Master Hui-1 was sweating profusely from the gaze of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma. He lowered his head hurriedly and said, "Thank you for your warning, Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma. I understand my mistake now." Excellent. Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma nodded slightly. You have to remember that the difference between becoming a Buddha or a fiend lies within a single thought. Always guard your heart and make sure you don't fall into the fiend Tao. Zen Master Hui-1 agreed repeatedly. Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma turned to look at Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament and nodded slightly. Patron, please calm down and listen to me. Although Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain is hiding in Avicii, we don't know if Emperor Bo Sun is hiding in Tianhuang sect. Furthermore, Fiend Emperor Apocalypse is presiding over the Fiend Domain. Patron, if you were to head to the Fiend Domain and Fiend Emperor Apocalypse notices you, it'll be difficult for you to escape unscathed. We still have to think about this matter at length. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.